Chapter 317. Go to watch net. Su Chan asked ecstatically, but Li Yundong was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he said, I thought you had been taken away by the monks of Shiyuan Temple, so I rushed to save you. But I didn't expect to let 2 golden snakes go. Do you still remember this? Go to watch net. 7K, OM. Su Chan blinked her eyes and didn't understand why Li Yundong would say that. She said, I remember. But does this have anything to do with destiny? Li Yundong smiled and said, Of course it has something to do with it. I remember that the abbot of Shiyuan Temple once said that he had a disciple who could predict the future. I didn't pay attention at that time, but now that you mentioned it, I remember. Isn't the disciple of the abbot of Shiyuan Temple practicing karmic connection? Su Chan was overjoyed. Then let's go find him now, shall we? Li Yundong patted the little girl on the forehead and said with a smile, Look at how anxious you are. It's so late. Doesn't the monk need to rest? Have a good rest tonight. We'll rush over early tomorrow morning. Su Chan beamed with joy and nodded vigorously. Li Yundong carried the little girl into the room and put her on the bed. He knew that Su Chan was worried about Ao Wushuang, so he didn't joke with her too much. He just covered her with a thin quilt and said softly, Don't worry, your master is just sealed. Although Yan Fong hates her to the core, she is now a yang spirit body and can't use magical items. She can't do anything to your master. Su Chan got under the quilt and watched Li Yundong tuck the quilt for her. When Li Yundong was about to turn around and leave, she suddenly called out in a low voice, Master. Li Yundong turned his head and smiled. Girl, what's wrong? Su Chan rolled her eyes, suddenly got up, hugged Li Yundong, and kissed him hard on the cheek. Then she quickly let go and got under the quilt with a smile, only revealing a pair of extremely beautiful and intelligent eyes. She said with a sweet smile, It's so good to have you here. Li Yundong chuckled. You fools. With that, he walked out of the room. At dawn the next day, after everyone had woken up, Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan, Wan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and Su Chan had all come to his room, so he told them what he and Su Chan had discussed last night. After that, he said, I thought about it all night and felt that the matter of Ao Wushuang couldn't be delayed, lest a long night brings trouble. But today is the day Jing Yuming and the others deliver the goods. It's not good for there to be no one in Dongwu City. I think it's better for us to split up. Zi Yuan also nodded and said to Li Yunyang, Hongling and I will go back to Dongwu City. Why don't you and Su Chan stay here to inquire about Ao Wushuang's whereabouts? Watch net. Li Yundong nodded and said, I think so too. Then he turned his head and looked at Zhou Qin. What about you? Do you want to stay here with me or go back to Dongwu City? Zhou Qin smiled slightly and said, Of course I will follow master. Li Yundong chuckled and didn't object. He immediately made a decision. Then it's settled. After breakfast, we'll split up. There was nothing delicious in the Taoist temple where the Fox Zen school was located. It was nothing more than vegetarian noodles, but Li Yundong and the others were not gluttons, so they had a good breakfast. After breakfast, Zi Yuan flew back to Dongwu City with Wan Hongling, while Li Yundong took the little girl and Zhou Qin to Shiyuan Temple in Dongwu City by car. The 3 of them took a taxi to Shiyuan Temple. This time, Li Yundong didn't choose to force his way in. Instead, he reported his name to a monk at the door and then waited respectfully at the door. While waiting, Li Yundong suddenly said to Su Chan, I'm really ashamed. Last time I broke in recklessly, the abbot not only didn't blame me, but also told me where you were, but I still don't know what his name is. Su Chan giggled and said, It's a matter of self-interest. Although Shiyuan Temple is not as good as the temples of the 4 famous Buddhist mountains, it is still a little famous. I know the Buddhist name of the abbot. Li Yundong was delighted. He put his palms together and said, Amit Ba, this is a matter of boundless merit. It's better than making a fool of yourself later. Su Chan smiled and said, The abbot here is called Master Purin. I heard that his magical power is quite amazing. Li Yundong smiled and said, That's right. I almost suffered a big loss in Shiyuan Temple before. The 2 of them were talking in low voices. Not long after, a greeting monk came over and respectfully asked Li Yundong to go with him. Li Yundong put his palms together and returned the greeting, then asked the greeting monk to lead the way. He followed a few steps behind. Along the way, Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin looking around the temple curiously, especially when they walked to the merit forest, which was full of all kinds of talismans and prayer sachets. Li Yundong whispered to Su Chan and Zhou Qin about the situation where he had fought with a middle-aged monk here. He was very eloquent, and in a few words, he described the fierce fighting vividly, which made Su Chan and Zhou Qin's eyes widen. Li Yundong pointed to the talismans and sachets hanging in the surrounding woods and said in a low voice, "The talismans here have absorbed the thoughts of many people and can be turned into powerful mental power to help the monks here increase their cultivation magical power." Go to the net. 7th KOM. Su Chan, who was listening attentively, suddenly said, "Yundong, why don't you follow them and carry some talismans with magical power with you?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Didn't I use the Five Thunders righteous talisman you gave me last time? Besides, talismans are the Shuntong magic of the Jinshan sect and other northern sections. My cultivation is mainly based on the Niden sect. If I want to learn talisman magic, I don't know where to learn it." Su Chan blinked and said, "If you have the immortal pen, you can draw any talisman you want." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Didn't you hear what Ziyuan said? This is the magical item of the great grandmaster Wuxia of the Danding sect. It has disappeared for more than 1,000 years. How could it still be in the world?" Su Chan pouted and snorted. "I hope all the good magical items in the world are ours." Li Yundong laughed and tapped her nose. "Little girl, you should be content." Zhou Qin looked around at the talismans and brocade pouches hanging on the merit forest and sighed. "When I came to the temple before, I saw people burning incense and worshipping Buddha, and some people hanging these talismans to pray for blessings. I laughed at them for being superstitious, but now it seems that I was ignorant." Li Yundong chuckled and said meaningfully, "God is fair to people. He closed the door of the previous world for you, but opened the door of the cultivation world for you." Zhou Qin was stunned when she heard this. Thinking about the profound meaning of Li Yundong's words, she didn't feel a little silly. When Li Yundong and the others passed through the merit forest, a middle-aged monk was waiting at the exit. Li Yundong looked over and saw that it was the middle-aged monk who had fought with him last time. He hurried forward, put his palms together, and said respectfully, "Master, we meet again. I offended you last time, but you haven't apologized. I'm really sorry." The middle-aged monk smiled slightly and returned the salute. "Jinren Li, you're too polite. As the saying goes, no fight, no deal. Without the last fight, how would I have known that Jinren Li could repel the joint attack of the 6 great sects? Your reputation is well-deserved." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I'm ashamed. I haven't asked for your name, master." The middle-aged monk smiled and said, "I'm Feikong. Jinren Li, please come in. The abbot is waiting for you." As he spoke, he glanced at Zhou Qin and Su Chan. When his eyes swept over Su Chan, Feikong frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. He thought to himself, "This fox spirit is really beautiful. I have cultivated for more than 40 years, but at first glance, my foundation was almost shaken. The danger of beauty is really powerful." But when his eyes fell on Zhou Qin, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He couldn't help thinking to himself, "This woman is obviously a virgin, but why does she have Yuan Yangzhen qi in her body? It's extremely rare for a mysterious Yin body to have such Yuan Yang qi. Could this woman be a cultivation genius that has not been seen in 100 years? It was easy for a man to cultivate, but difficult for a woman to cultivate. This was a well-known truth in the cultivation world, but once a woman succeeded in cultivation, she would be a great master." Feikong looked Zhou Qin up and down and sighed in his heart. He couldn't help but say, "Benefactress, may I ask if you have a master?" Zhou Qin came from a noble family and behaved very politely. She smiled slightly and said, "Yes." Feikong was disappointed. "Ah, who is it?" Zhou Qin smiled and said, "He's far away, but close at hand. Only then did Feikong understand. He put his palms together and said enviously, "Jinrenli, you are so lucky to have such a good disciple." "I'm very envious." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Monks pay attention to the emptiness of worldly desires. Aren't you tempted by the mundane?" Feikong retorted, "Otherwise, the way of cultivation focuses on one's own cultivation, and secondly on the teaching of disciples. If Hamren, the fifth patriarch of Buddhism, hadn't found a good disciple like Huaining, how could we have the glory of the sixth patriarch's Huaining Zen sect unifying the world in the future?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Yes, this monk is right. I can't do everything myself in the future, can I? It's okay now. If I become famous in the future, people will come to challenge me all day long. Won't I die of exhaustion? Li Yundong understood and decided to teach Zhou Qin cultivation when he went back. He put his palms together and said gratefully, "Master, you're right. I've learned a lot." Feikong smiled and returned the salute. "You're welcome, Jinrenli." The two of them talked along the way, and it didn't take long for them to arrive at the Zen room of the abbot. Feikong glanced at Su Chan and Zhou Qin and said, "Benefactors, would you like to follow me to the room next door to have a rest for a while?" As a demon, Su Chan was naturally afraid of such an important place of Buddhism. How could she be willing to leave Li Yundong's side? She grabbed the corner of Li Yundong's clothes tightly with both hands and refused to let go. She looked at him eagerly, for fear that he would nod and agree. Zhou Qin was good at observing people's expressions, so she said, "Does this Buddhist land also value men more than women?" Hearing this, Feikong was stunned and didn't know how to answer for a moment. Just as he was feeling embarrassed, he heard the voice of an old man in the Zen room laughing and saying, "Amitabha, Buddha once said that all living beings in the world are equal. How can there be such a thing as valuing men over women? Feikong, go ahead and let them in." Only then did Feikong put his palms together and turn to leave. After Li Yundong watched Feikong leave, he took Su Chan and Zhou Qin into the Zen room. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Purin sitting on the bed, holding a string of Buddha beads in one hand and smiling at him. "We meet again, Jinrenli," Purin said with a smile. Li Yundong bowed respectfully and said, "Yes, greetings, Master Purin." Purin glanced at Su Chan and Zhou Qin faintly, his expression unchanged. He looked at Li Yundong and said, "Jinrenli, you must have come here for something. If you have something to say, you might as well say it." Seeing that Purin was so straightforward, Li Yundong didn't beat around the bush and simply told him what had happened. Finally, he said, "As the leader of the Fox Zen school, I know that the cultivators of other sects in the cultivation world think that I have given up on myself, but how can they know my determination to reorganize the Fox Zen school? Now that the seniors of our Fox Zen school have disappeared, I thought about it and had no choice but to ask you for help. If you don't help me, I'm afraid I'll be at a loss." Purin nodded slightly and chuckled. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since you are determined to manage the Fox Zen school into a famous and decent sect, this is a matter of boundless merit and virtue. Buddha will be very happy to know about it." Back then, the founder of the Fox Zen school, Pan Shi, had some connections with our Buddhism. However, later, the mystical silver fox got in the way, so we turned friends into enemies. Now that the Fox Zen school has fallen into the hands of Jinrenli, it seems that there is hope for it to be revived. Naturally, I should help Jinrenli with such a good thing." As he said this, he picked up a copper bell beside him and shook it gently. After a while, a young monk came in from the door and saluted respectfully. "Master, what can I do for you?" Purin smiled and said, "Fanning, take them to my disappointing disciple." Fan was shocked and looked embarrassed. "Master, you want me to go? This is not good, is it?" Purin said in a deep voice. Buddha said, "If I don't go to hell, who will? How can I be picky about this kind of thing?" Fanning's face suddenly became bitter, and he thought to himself, "Yes, you said yourself that you won't go to hell. Who will go to hell? Why don't you go to hell yourself? Why me?" But he didn't dare to say such words, nor did he dare to go against Purin's will. He bowed and said to Li Yundong reluctantly, "Please come with me." Li Yundong followed him curiously and thought to himself, "Where is Purin's disciple who can use the karmic connection? Why does he say that if I don't go to hell, who will? Why is it so scary?" Chapter 318. Go to watch net. Purin, the abbot of Shiyuan Temple, watched Li Yunyang and the others leave. After a while, Feikong came in, put his palms together, and asked, "Master, why are you helping him? This person has had a conflict with our Shiyuan Temple before, and the disciples have a lot of criticism in private. Moreover, his reputation in the cultivation world is extremely bad. If we deal with him, will it?" Purin didn't wait for him to finish speaking. He looked up at the middle-aged monk and said leisurely, "Feikong, when you became my disciple, I named you Feikong. The original intention was to let you understand the meaning of the 4 elements being empty. Go to watch net. 7KOM. The cultivation of the young disciples is still shallow, and the world is so complicated and tempting. I can understand that they can't understand, but you've been with me for dozens of years, and you still haven't understood this point. You shouldn't. Feikong looked ashamed and bowed. "Master, please teach me." Purin stood up and said, "The 4 elements of Buddha are empty. The sky is empty, the earth is empty, the mountains and the oceans are empty, and even your physical body and divine sense are empty. But only the great way of Buddha is real. I don't care what others think of us, but I have to consider how our Dharma will be passed on in the future and how it will be carried forward." Zhenren, I observed his behavior and saw that he is a righteous person who abhors evil. I observe his words and saw that he is a down-to-earth person who does not boast. Finally, I observed his appearance and saw that he is surrounded by beautiful women, but he is still a boy with Yuanyang body, and the women around him are also virgins with Yuanin body. It can be seen that he is a cultivator with great determination and is not greedy for beauty. A person with great determination and great ambition will definitely be able to achieve great things in the future. Regardless of his talent, based on these 2 points, I can conclude that he will be a great cultivator in the future, and his achievements will not be inferior to the leaders of the contemporary sections. As Purin spoke, he walked to the window, opened the wooden window, pointed to the big tree in the garden, and said, "However, it is not enough for a person to have great determination and great ambition. Look at this tree. Even if it can grow into a towering tree, it may still grow crooked. Trees are like this, and so are people. If a person harbors evil intentions, then his determination and ambition will become a sin for him to commit evil in the future. Once such a person commits evil, it will be 100 times worse than an ordinary person." Purin turned around and continued, "So, I carefully observed his face again. I saw him look straight at me twice. His eyes were clear and bright, without the slightest evil thoughts or crooked thoughts, and his eyebrows were even more awe-inspiring. Therefore, I believe that this person will definitely be a great cultivator in our righteous way in the future." Purin glanced at Feikong and sighed, "Feikong, you're not the head abbot, so you don't understand my difficulties. Although our Shiyuan temple is quite famous in Dongbu City, it is far inferior to the 4 famous temples. Moreover, the Taoists in Dongbu City are very powerful, and the forces of Jingyi School and the 6 great sects are spreading here. In the near future, they will hold the Taoist assembly here, which is held every 4 years in the cultivation world. If our Shiyuan temple does not make some strong external help, not only will we not be able to cope with the erosion of these sects, but I'm afraid that we will also be unable to support the great calamity of the cultivation world in the future." Feikong looked puzzled and asked, "Master, why don't we ask for help from other Buddhist sects?" Purin shook his head. "Since ancient times, there has been no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. The same is true of our Buddhist sections. Go to the net. 7KOM. Today, Shiyuan Temple has asked for help from other Buddhist sections. In the future, even if you win against them, they will gossip. Let me tell you something. There was a woman who needed help from Guanyin, so she devoutly recited the name of Guanyin Bodhisattva in front of the statue of Guanyin every day. Every day, she recited it thousands or even tens of thousands of times. But one day, her son suddenly asked her, "You pray to Guanyin Bodhisattva every day, but if something happens to Guanyin Bodhisattva, who will she turn to?" As he spoke, Purin looked at Feikong with a smile. "Feikong, if you were Guanyin Bodhisattva, who would you turn to?" Feikong suddenly understood. He put his palms together and said, "It's better to ask for help than to ask for help from others." Purin put his palms together and said with a smile, "That's right. Instead of humbly begging other Buddhist peers, it's better for us to find some strong help ourselves." Zhenrenli is now in the stage where he has just emerged. I dare say that he will definitely be a hero in the future and will be an earth-shattering figure. If we don't make friends with him now, when will we? Feikong showed a look of admiration. "Master, you are far-sighted. I am far inferior to you." But after he finished speaking, he thought of something and couldn't help but show a strange expression. He said, "But, Master, aren't you afraid that your disciple will cause you trouble again?" When Purin heard this, he couldn't help but look a little embarrassed. He was stunned for a while and suddenly smiled bitterly. "Amitabha, then I can only let Zhenrenli pray for himself." At this time, Li Yundong was walking out of the temple with a young disciple of Purin. He talked to the monk named Fanning and said, "Master, where are we going?" Zhou Qin and Su Chan could be said to be a stunning beauty in the world, while Su Chan was a beautiful fox spirit. No matter which one of them, they would give a great impact to men, especially young monks who did not have enough cultivation. Fanning didn't look sideways along the way and didn't dare to look at Su Chan and Zhou Qin at all. He looked down, as if he wanted to seal all his 7 apertures divine senses. At this time, when he saw Li Yundong talking to him, he had no choice but to quickly return the salute and say, "I don't deserve to be called a master. You can just call me Fanning. I don't know where he's going, but this senior martial brother of mine is very unruly and his whereabouts are always uncertain. I think it will take a lot of effort to find him." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "I see that your abbot is using his cell phone. Doesn't he have a cell phone to contact him?" Fanning smiled bitterly and said, "Whatever valuable things my senior brother has on him, he will pawn them as soon as possible." Li Yundong was taken aback. "Could it be that your Shi Xiang is a gambling addict?" Fanning shook his head and said, No, my senior brother doesn't like to gamble." Li Yundong's face was filled with confusion. "What's the reasons?" Fanning said with a strange expression. "You'll know when you get there. Watch net. 7K.O.M. They got in the taxi. Fanning sat in front of the car and said to the driver, "Master, go to Mudu Hong Kong Street." When Li Yundong heard the name of the place, he was shocked. He thought he had heard wrong, so he quickly asked, "Where are we going?" Fanning coughed dryly. "Mudu Hong Kong Street." Li Yundong stammered, Isn't this the red light district?" Fanning's expression became more and more strange. "Yes." Li Yundong was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth. Your senior martial brother is in such a place?" Fanning looked ashamed. "Yes." Li Yundong's eyes widened, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. Zhou Qin, who was beside him, also had a strange look on her face and was also speechless. Su Chan comforted him and said, "Yundong, not all the people there are debauchery. It's possible that this master is there. Towards the end, she couldn't go on. What was a monk doing in the red light district? Su Chan said with a dry smile, "Maybe he is cultivating in the secular world." Hearing this, Li Yundong quickly nodded as if to comfort himself. "Well, it's possible. A master is naturally a bit maverick." It was in the morning, and there was no traffic on the road. After about 20 minutes, they arrived at Mudu Hong Kong Street. At this time in the morning, most of the entertainment places here were closed. The streets were very deserted, in sharp contrast to the bright lights of the last time Li Yundong had been here. Fanning took Li Yundong around for a while, then said with a wry smile, "It's not time yet. I can't find him yet." Li Yundong asked in confusion, When can we find him? Fanning said with a strange expression. Probably after 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Li Yundong asked curiously. Why at this time? Zhou Qin couldn't bear to listen anymore. She pulled Li Yundong aside and said with a slightly red face, 4 or 5 in the afternoon is the time when the entertainment city opens. Li Yundong asked, why?
Why does it open at this time?
As a girl, Zhou Qin had to explain this kind of thing to a boy, which was really a little embarrassing. She coughed dryly and said very unnaturally, because this is the time when most men get off work. Even if they are asked by their wives at home, they can say that they are working overtime. At this time, their families will not be suspicious. So many men choose this time to come. Ahem, you know. Li Yundong suddenly understood. He said in a strange tone, I don't know, but you know very well. Zhou Qin blushed and said angrily, I'm explaining it to you, aren't I? You're so annoying. I won't tell you next time. Li Yundong quickly smiled apologetically and said, Don't mind me. I just said it casually. Don't think too much. As he said this, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Fanning with a strange expression. Master Fanning, you also know very well. Fanning's face was full of embarrassment and shame. He was originally from the south of the Yangtze River, and he was fair and clean. This time, his face was as red as a cooked prawn. He stammered, I also heard it from my senior brother. Li Yundong took a deep breath and couldn't help sighing. Your senior brother is really a weirdo in the monk world. I just don't know his name. Fanning put his palms together and said, My senior brother's original name is Ding Zonglei, and his Buddhist name is Wuhua. Li Yundong asked curiously, Since your senior brother is a disciple of Master Purin, shouldn't he also be in the Dharma generation? Fanning smiled bitterly and said, In theory, that's the case, but my senior brother disliked the name given by Master Purin, so he changed it to Wuhua himself. He took it from the meaning of Tang Bohu's poem, No flowers, no wine, no hoes, no fields. Li Yundong also smiled bitterly and said, This is the first time I've heard of such a maverick monk in this world. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, saw that there was a hint of worry between Li Yundong's brows. It was obvious that he was worried that this monk was just a nominal monk. She comforted him and said, You don't have to worry. Maybe this master is a first-class figure in Jidian. Hearing this, Li Yundong was relieved. He nodded and said with a smile, Yes, what you said makes sense. I was overthinking it. Fanning said, It's too early to come now. Why don't we come again in the evening? My senior brother has always been elusive. We can only find him here in the evening. Li Yundong said helplessly. Well, that's the only way. They waited until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when Li Yundong and the others came to the streets of Hong Kong again. At this time, they saw that all the entertainment venues had opened their doors and were decorated with lanterns and streamers. Most of the sexy and beautiful women were standing at the door, greeting the guests respectfully. At this time, the traffic flow on the street had obviously increased, and well-dressed men were constantly coming and going. Li Yundong looked at the many entertainment venues on the street and said with a wry smile, There are so many shops here. How can we find him? Fanning also said with a wry smile, There's no way. Let's go door to door. Li Yundong was depressed. He had never dreamed that he would return to this red light street and have to go door to look for someone. Zhou Qin and Su Chan looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. The two girls followed behind Li Yundong with a straight face, pretending to look straight ahead. Li Yundong and the others went door to door. After searching about 10 shops, Li Yundong felt a headache coming on because of the strong smell of cosmetics on the girls here. He couldn't help asking, There are at least dozens of shops here. How long will it take to find him? Fanning said helplessly, There's no way, so when my master asked me to come, I didn't want to. Li Yundong opened his mouth and was about to speak, but suddenly there was a noise coming from a shop not far away. He turned his head and saw that the shop was extraordinary. It was built like a hotel, and there were a few golden words on it. Crystal Love International Entertainment City. Wow, this shop is very familiar. Li Yundong took a closer look and saw a few security guards coming out. The security guards were holding a man, and behind them was a coquettish woman. Li Yundong looked again and thought, wow, this is also an acquaintance. Isn't this Mei Nyang? He was about to speak when he saw Fanning staring at the man who had been carried out. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. This guy can't be Wu Hua, can he? Li Yundong looked over and saw that the man had been carried out by several big men and thrown to the ground with a thud. He was wearing a gray monk's robe, and there were a few scars on his bald head. Mei Nyang stood at the door of the shop with her hands on her hips and scolded, "You bald donkey! How dare you play with women on credit? Are you tired of living? If it weren't for the fact that you often hang around here, I would have broken your middle leg today." Mei Nyang's voice was sharp and crisp, and the monk's appearance and clothes were also extremely eye-catching. For a moment, he attracted countless gazes. Li Yundong, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin were all stunned. They saw that the monk had been beaten black and blue, and he was lying on the ground with a dirty face. He didn't look like a master at all. Li Yundong couldn't help shouting in his heart, "Damn it, this guy is not Wu Hua. This guy is not Wu Hua." But at this time, Fanning suddenly shouted in surprise, "Shi Xiang." This sentence sent Li Yundong to hell. He immediately burst into tears and said, "Damn it, this guy really doesn't have any flowers. The master is really a master.
Wu Hua?
I think he's a greedy man." Merry Christmas, everyone. Tang Tang, I had a stiff neck yesterday, and the pain in my neck was unbearable. Today, I went out for a massage. Chapter 319. Go to WatchNet. When Wu Hua heard Fanning's voice, he immediately raised his head. There were still 2 blood-red nostrils hanging under his nose. He looked surprised. "Shirdi, you came at the right time. Lend me 600 yuan. When he said this, Fanning almost wanted to find a hole to crawl into. His face was purplish-red, and he hummed and hawed for a long time. He dilly-dallied and refused to approach. Go to WatchNet. 7 Mei Nyang saw Li Yundong and the others and Fanning at a glance. She first said with a happy face, "Oh, isn't this Boss Li? How come you have time to come here today? Hey, it's really embarrassing for you to see this. Wait a minute, I'll deal with things here." With that, she turned around and glared at Fanning, saying, "Hey, is he or she Xiang? Is it great to be a monk? Don't you want to pay? Hurry up and pay the 600 yuan for him. Look at so many people here. Even if you're not ashamed, I'm ashamed for you." While she was talking, there were already many people gathered on the side of the road. Many people pointed at the scene and snickered. Fanning's face was as red as cinnabar. He searched all over his body and finally found 500 yuan. He said in a low voice, "That's all I have." Mei Nyang's eyes swept over them, and she snatched them away. After a rough count, a smile suddenly appeared on her cold face. "Since you're paying, it's easy. Although the amount isn't right, seeing that you're monks, I'll give you a discount." After that, she turned around and giggled at Li Yundong. "Boss Li, I've missed you for a long time. How come you have time to play today?" Mei Nyang glanced at Su Chan and Zhou Qin beside him and said in a sweet voice, "If you want to play, just come and play. Why did you bring your friends here? We don't have a place to entertain female guests." Zhou Qin's face changed when she heard this, and she glared at Mei Nyang. Su Chan made a face at her and said, "How shameless. We're here to look for someone." Mei Nyang asked curiously, "Looking for someone? Who are you looking for in this place?" "Those who come here are either guests or prostitutes." As she spoke, she glanced at Wu Hua and rolled her eyes. "Could it be that you're looking for him?" At this time, Wu Hua had already gotten up. His kasaya was wrinkled and covered in dirt. He looked as miserable as one could imagine. For a moment, Li Yundong and the others were all embarrassed. They looked away one after another, not daring to admit that they had come to find Wu Hua. Mei Nyang's heart was as clear as a mirror. She sneered and rolled her eyes at Zhou Qin and Su Chan. "You came to find a customer who doesn't pay, yet you're still so arrogant. Really, what kind of world is this?" As she spoke, she turned around and walked back into the shop. Li Yundong felt like he was going crazy. What kind of world is this? Was this country really flourishing with prostitutes? Fan waited for the people around him to disperse a little before he suppressed his shame and asked Wu Hua, Xixiang, what's wrong with you? Wu Hua patted the dust off his body and let out a long sigh. His originally embarrassed and dirty face actually showed a dignified look. Alas, I saw a female benefactor with a lot of wisdom here in the past few days. Originally, I wanted to enlighten her, so I went up to talk to her. I didn't expect that after chatting with her for 2 hours, she actually asked me to give her money for 2 hours when I came out. I went to the internet. 7th K, OM, I'm just a monk. Where did I get the money? So I had to ask them for alms first, and then give it to them. Who would have thought that I would be treated like this? Alas, the moral degeneration of the world is getting worse and worse. At this time, Li Yundong and the others suddenly understood. Su Chan's mind was simple. She looked at Wu Hua with admiration and said, Master, you are so amazing. You can actually lie in the mud to enlighten all living beings. Zhou Qin said doubtfully, do you have to choose such a place to enlighten all living beings? Do you want to be a whore master? Wu Hua's face was solemn. Buddha was also a beggar. Why can't I be a whore master? At this time, Li Yundong was also a little confused. He thought to himself, is this guy a perverted monk or an eminent monk? He looked like a perverted monk just now, but now listening to his words, there was actually a hidden meaning in his words, vaguely like an eminent monk. Li Yundong thought for a moment, coughed dryly, and said, Master Wu Hua, I have something to ask of you. I wonder if you have time? Only then did Wu Hua turn his face and look at Li Yundong. He smiled slightly and said, Jinren, right? Li Yundong asked curiously, how do you know my surname? Oh, by the way, Mainyang mentioned it before. Wu Hua shook his head and said, no, I took a lesson a few days ago. I had expected that you would come to me, so I have been going in and out of this place recently. Li Yundong was surprised. You guessed that I would come here? Then why didn't I see you last time? Wu Hua smiled slightly. The time is not right. Naturally, we can't meet. Seeing that Wu Hua's words were full of deep meaning, Li Yundong's suspicion of him was reduced a little, but he still had some doubts in his heart. He said, since you expected to see me here, how could you not expect to be thrown out in such a mess? Li Yundong's words were very rude, but Wu Hua's face was calm and unfathomable. He put his palms together and said, Amitabha, how can a doctor cure himself? My fatality skill can help you, Jinren Li, but it can't help me. Seeing that Wu Hua even knew the purpose of his trip, Li Yundong no longer had any doubts. He said respectfully, it turns out that you are indeed a master like Ji Dian. I was too naive. Wu Hua smiled and said, it doesn't matter. Jinren Li, wait a moment. I'll talk to that female benefactor and come back. This time, my main purpose is to purify her. Let's go. As he said this, he pointed to a pretty woman standing at the gate of Crystal Love International Entertainment City, not far away. Li Yundong looked in the direction of his finger and saw that the woman was very beautiful. She was delicate and pitiful, and she couldn't hide her flirtatiousness. He thought to himself, this master is really good at choosing people to purify. He actually chose such a beautiful and sexy woman. It seems that he's also a lascivious monk. But on second thought, he couldn't help thinking, isn't it the same for me? Su Chan is beautiful, and Zhou Qin is even more beautiful. Not to mention Zi Yuan, she can be said to be a national beauty. What do they think of me? What right do I have to criticize Wu Hua? Thinking of this, Li Yundong suddenly felt relieved. He saw Wu Hua walk up to the woman and whisper something, but the woman kept wiping her tears and looking at Wu Hua with tears in her eyes. The two of them said goodbye reluctantly, as if they were reluctant to part with each other. Li Yundong watched from the side and felt strange. He thought to himself, is this master going to purify people or pick up girls? Beside him, Su Chan sighed with emotion in her heart. This master is not afraid of people's words to purify such a woman. He really has the demeanor of an eminent monk. However, Zhou Qin couldn't help looking at Wu Hua and the woman up and down, thinking to herself, this monk is not pure. He speaks in a dignified manner. He can hide it from Li Yundong, but he can't hide it from me. After Wu Hua finished talking to the woman, Wu Hua walked up to Li Yundong and put his palms together. Zhenrenli, I've kept you waiting for a long time. Let's go. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, since I have something to ask of you, why don't you go to my place? I hope you don't mind. Wu Hua chuckled and said freely, haha, I can even go to this red light district. Why can't I go to the fox's den? When Li Yundong heard this, he couldn't help but dispel his doubts about Wu Hua. He smiled and said, thank you. As he said this, he glanced at Fanning beside him and said, Master Fanning, do you want to go with me? Fanning thought to himself, it's already bad luck for me to accompany you to this red light district to find Shixiang. How can I accompany you to the fox's den? Shixiang's cultivation is profound, but my cultivation is low. If I go to that kind of place, will I survive? Fanning shook his head like a rattledrum and begged for mercy. Zhenrenli, please spare me. I have to go back quickly. After that, he didn't have time to say goodbye to his Shixiang. Along the way, he lowered his head and looked straight ahead. He recited scriptures and suddenly fled the erotic red light street. Wu Hua looked at his figure, shook his head, and sighed. Pink skeletons are pink. My Shixiang still can't see through them. Li Yundong said with admiration, Master, you play the world of mortals without getting involved. You're admirable. They stopped a car on the road and then headed for Mount Tianlong. Before getting in the car, Zhou Qin noticed that when Wu Hua got in the car, he glanced behind him intentionally or unintentionally. Zhou Qin saw his action and smiled in her heart, becoming more and more convinced of her judgment. When they arrived at the Fox Zen School of Mount Tianlong, Li Yundong walked into the Taoist temple with Wu Hua. The two little foxes, who were cleaning the front hall of the Taoist temple, saw a bald monk walking in with the leader. They looked at Wu Hua curiously from a distance and whispered to each other. Hey, why did the leader bring a bald donkey back? I don't know. It's so strange. Is he going to do the first 7 rites for the Grandmaster? I don't know, but you should say the former Grandmaster. But if he wants to do the first 7 rites, it seems that a bald donkey is a little too little. Li Yundong heard the two little foxes whispering to each other, and the word bald donkey kept coming out of their mouths. He glanced at Wu Hua awkwardly, only to see that Wu Hua's expression was as usual. While admiring him in his heart, he couldn't help sighing, these little foxes really lack discipline. He turned his head, glared at the two little foxes, and shouted, What are you talking about? Go and do your own things. Li Yundong had already established his dominance in the gazebo behind the school. As soon as he shouted at them, the two little foxes shuddered in fear. They looked at each other and ran to the other houses, slamming the door shut behind them. Only pairs of curious and frightened eyes could be seen peeking out from the crack of the door. Li Yundong was shocked. Seeing the scene, Wu Hua smiled slightly and said, Zhenrenli is so powerful. Li Yundong laughed dryly and said, My disciples are naughty. I'm sorry to make you laugh. After they arrived at Li Yundong's residence, Li Yundong saw that Chao Yi, Lui Wehong, Zhuang Yiting, and the others were also alarmed, so he greeted them with a smile. Li Yundong glanced around and asked casually, Why isn't Zhang Sunhong here? Chao Yi, Zhuang Yiting, and Lui Wehong looked at each other, and Chao Yi quickly said, Fourth Shiji is cultivating in the backyard. Li Yundong didn't take it seriously and just roughly explained what had happened. Chao Yi and the others were surprised and delighted. They said to Wu Hua one after another, Master Wu Hua, you don't mind our Fox Zen School coming here with a bad reputation. Everyone in the Fox Zen School is grateful for your kindness. If you can help us find the whereabouts of junior sister Wu Shuang, we will definitely thank you. Li Yundong laughed and said, You guys are really good at flattering me. As the leader, I don't have anything to say. His words made everyone around him burst into laughter. Li Yundong smiled, turned around, and said to Wu Hua, Master, please use your supernatural power to help us find Yan Fang's whereabouts. However, Wu Hua turned his head, looked at Chao Yi and the others, and said, "The law can't be spread to 6 ears. One person had 2 ears, 2 people had 4 ears, and 3 people had 6 ears." The meaning of Wu Hua's words was too obvious. Chao Yi and the others immediately came to their senses and said to Li Yundong, "Leader, we'll go down first." After Chao Yi and the others left, Wu Hua still stared at Zhou Qin and Su Chan, still refusing to speak. Zhou Qin had no choice but to say to Li Yundong, "Master, I have something to do first." Su Chan was the only one who refused to leave, relying on her close relationship with Li Yundong and asking about the whereabouts of her master. However, when Wu Hua saw that she didn't leave, he also refused to speak. He just looked down, put his palms together, and recited the scriptures silently. Seeing that he didn't speak, Su Chan reached out and pulled at Li Yundong's sleeve, looking at him with a pitiful expression. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong couldn't help but plead for her. "Master Wu Hua, Su Chan is my girlfriend and Ao Wushuang, who was taken away by Yan Fong, is her master. She is not an outsider. Don't you need to leave?" Wu Hua didn't even look at him and repeated, "The law can't be spread to 6 ears." Li Yundong saw that Wu Hua's attitude was firm. Anyway, only 2 people could say it, not 3. It was up to him to decide which 2. He couldn't help but say to Su Chan with a wry smile, "Then I'll leave for a while." No matter how childish Su Chan was, she knew that there was no reason for Li Yundong to avoid the matter. She had no choice but to say unhappily, Then I'll go." She looked at Li Yundong eagerly, then at Wu Hua. She walked to the door and said pitifully, "Then I'll go." Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's not a life and death separation. Why do you have to make it so scary?" Su Chan nodded and turned to leave. Li Yundong turned around and said to Wu Hua, "Master, now there are only 4 ears left.
Can you tell me?"
However, Wu Hua smiled slightly, raised his eyes to look at the door, and said in a clear voice, "Come out." "Why are you hiding? Do you think that this little invisibility technique can hide from my eyes?" As soon as he finished speaking, Su Chan's figure appeared at the door. She made a face at Wu Hua and said, "Master, you are really amazing. I'm convinced. I'll leave now." As she said this, she stuck out her tongue at Li Yundong and then ran away. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, "This little girl is getting more and more naughty." He coughed dryly and said to Wu Hua, "Now can you tell me?" Chapter 320. Go to WatchNet. Wu Hua glanced at him, raised his index finger meaningfully, and said, "If you want to hear the true method, you need to be sincere. Go to WatchNet." After that, he closed his eyes. Li Yundong stared blankly and was confused. Need to be sincere? How sincere would it be? I went to invite him in person and brought him here. Am I not sincere? This master is really arrogant, isn't he? Li Yundong asked tentatively, "Master, are you a little hungry? Do you want to eat something first?" Wu Hua closed his eyes and recited the scripture softly, as if he hadn't heard Li Yundong's words and didn't pay any attention to him. Li Yundong smiled dryly and asked, "Master, are you tired from the journey and want to have a good rest?" Wu Hua was still the same. If it weren't for the fact that he was still reciting the scriptures in a low voice, Li Yundong would have thought that he had passed away. Li Yundong said helplessly, "Master, do you want a good room?" Wu Hua was still going his own way. He simply recited the scripture, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." Li Yundong, who was beside him, saw that he had found Wu Hua and invited him here. He was about to know the whereabouts of Ao Wushuang, but he suddenly began to play tricks. He was depressed. He asked a few more questions in a row, but Wu Hua still ignored him. He almost went crazy and couldn't help but want to lose his temper, but on second thought, he rushed out of the room. Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Chao Yi, and the others who were waiting for him outside the room saw him come out, and they all surrounded him and asked, "Yundong, what did Master Wu Hua say? Where is my master?" "Master, what did this monk say?" "Leader, where is my shimmies?" Li Yundong was already depressed. Hearing their quarrel, he became more and more annoyed. He raised his hand and said angrily, "Shut up." As soon as Li Yundong lost his temper, the women next to him immediately fell silent and looked at him eagerly. Li Yundong said gloomily, "This master is playing tricks with me. He told me that if I want to know the true method, I need to be sincere." Chao Yi couldn't help but ask, "Leader, what did you say?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "I asked him if he was hungry." Everyone asked in unison, "What did he say?" Li Yundong shrugged. "He ignored me. Watch net." Su Chan then asked, "Yundong, did you ask him again?" Li Yundong said gloomily, "Yes, I asked him more than a dozen questions in a row, but he ignored me. He just kept chanting the scriptures. No matter how hard I asked, I couldn't get any clues, so I had to come out." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Su Chan couldn't help but complain, "Isn't this master too unfathomable?" However, Chao Yi shook her head and said, No, it's true that the true method is unpleasant. In ancient times, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan asked Qibo for help. He came to visit him again and again, but the door was shut in his face. In the end, he fasted for half a month and bathed and changed his clothes before receiving the teachings. Qibo then taught the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan the skills of health cultivation. In the end, the Yellow Emperor was able to become an immortal. Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. "Do I have to fast for half a month?" Chao Yi said solemnly, "Fasting to show piety is a rule of Buddhism. Leader, please accommodate him." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "What's so great about eating vegetarian food for half a month? I can eat vegetarian food for a year. The problem is that I have a lot of things to do now. How can I have time to stay here for half a month?" Chao Yi was also in a dilemma. She knew that Li Yundong was running around for the livelihood of the Fox Sen school. As a person who didn't produce anything, she couldn't help him, so she naturally couldn't say anything. She could only ask tentatively, "Leader, can you ask Master Wuhua what he means?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay, I'll ask." After that, he walked into the room again, but not long after, he came out again with a sad face. As soon as he saw them, he spread out his hands and said, "Still the same, ignore me." Everyone was disappointed. Su Chan couldn't help asking, "Does Master Wuhua want money?" As soon as she said this, everyone looked at her in unison. Chao Yi couldn't help scolding, "Chana, how can you say that about Master Wuhua? How can a monk be so vulgar?" Li Yundong also pretended to be angry and glared at her. "Even if you want to talk nonsense, don't you know to keep your voice down? If Master Wuhua hears it, he will be angry and leave. What should we do?" Su Chan lowered her head with a wronged face, rubbed the corner of her clothes with her fingers, and murmured, "I just want to help. It's just a random guess." When Chao Yi heard this, she suddenly had an idea. She said in a low voice, "By the way, some masters like calligraphy and paintings or antiques. Leader, you might as well ask if Master Wuhua has any such hobbies." Li Yundong said, "Okay, I'll ask around." Before he finished speaking, he walked into the room again, but not long after, he came out again.
Go to the internet.
Everyone looked at him eagerly. When he walked up to them and sighed, they also sighed heavily in disappointment. Li Yundong said with a wry smile, "Why do I feel like we are playing a game of guess?" As expected, this master was from the Zen sect. Why did he have to hit the nail on the head and make people guess everything? How can he stand it? He thought to himself, Ziyuan is the best at this kind of thing. She is smarter than others, so she must have a way to guess what Master Wuhua is thinking. Unfortunately, she is not here now. Of course, Li Yundong knew that he couldn't say this out loud, otherwise the little girl would feel sad and remorseful again. Just when everyone was at a loss, Zhou Qin, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly said, "I think I may know what Master Wuhua is thinking." Li Yundong and the others suddenly became spirited. They looked at her and asked, "Tell me quickly." Zhou Qin thought for a moment and said, "Logically speaking, the people of Buddhism should be pure and have no desires. But in the past few days, I've been following my master and found that cultivation also requires daily necessities. The people of our Taoist sects are like this, so there's no reason why the people of Buddhism don't have such needs. Moreover, monks don't produce, so they have to beg alms to maintain their own lives. Li Yundong couldn't help saying, but I've already inquired about it just now. Master Wuhua doesn't care about me at all. Zhou Qin shook her head and said, no, I don't think that's what Master Wuhua is asking for. In my previous life, some officials asked each other for help, and it was always tit for tat. I promoted your people, and you also promoted mine. So I'm thinking, since we are asking Master Wuhua to help us find a person, is he also asking us to help him find a person? Su Chan and Chao Yi asked at the same time, who? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth and said in surprise, no way could it be. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong and nodded. Yes, I guess this is the person Master Wuhua wants. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Please, he is an eminent monk, okay? How could he want a young lady to negotiate terms with him? Zhou Qin smiled slightly. Master, I have been paying attention to Master Wuhua and the young lady who is reluctant to part with him. I found that Master Wuhua is not only impure, but also has hidden feelings for this young lady. When he left, his eyes were full of attachment, and he even looked back at her. So, I think Master Wuhua wants us to help him find this young lady and save her from suffering. Li Yundong pondered for a while and was about to go into the room to ask Wuhua, but Zhou Qin stopped him and said in a low voice, how can you ask such a thing? Even if you ask, he will still ignore you. You just need to find her. If she's not here, then let her go back. It's just a waste of money for us to go there. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said with a strange face, I think what you said makes sense, but I still don't believe that Master Wuhua means this. But even though he said that, he still decided to do as Zhou Qin told him. Li Yundong said, well, I'll go by myself. Su Chan hurriedly said, Yundong, I can't do without you. You stay here and I'll go. Anyway, I know the way. Li Yundong looked at her hesitantly. You go? Do you know where that place is? Su Chan put her palms together with a smile and said pretentiously, Ba, if I don't go to hell, who will? Li Yundong laughed. He knew that the little girl wanted to help him share some things, so she was so active. He couldn't stop her, so he pinched the little girl's cheek affectionately and said, be careful on the way. Do you have money with you? Su Chan said with a smile, I have money. After that, she slipped away. After watching Su Chan leave, Li Yundong turned around and said to Zhou Qin jokingly, if you guess wrong, I will punish you by making you eat vegetarian food for half a month. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled. Are there any meat dishes here? Only then did Li Yundong remember that the Fox Zen school had always provided vegetarian food and ingredients. There was no meat at all. He laughed. The group waited for nearly 2 hours. Just as Li Yundong was getting a little worried, he suddenly heard Su Chan's voice from afar. She was like a general who had returned to the court after a victory. She began to announce the good news from afar. Yundong, I'm back. Li Yundong turned around like a gust of wind. As soon as he turned around, he saw the little girl throw herself into his arms like a gust of wind. She put her arms around his waist and giggled. When Li Yundong saw that the little girl had come back, his heart fell back into his chest. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a very coquettish and enchanting voice. Hey, I, Mainyang, made my debut at the age of 16. I've been doing business for so long, but it's the first time I've seen someone doing business here. Good creativity, good environment, amazing, amazing. I admire you. Li Yundong raised his head when he heard the voice. At a glance, he saw Mainyang walking over, dressed in nude clothes. Beside her was a beautiful and delicate woman in a long white dress. Mainyang walked up to Li Yundong and the others and giggled. Oh, Boss Li, I can see you everywhere. She looked around and said flirtatiously, is this all your property? I didn't expect that Boss Li would have such a fortune at such a young age. You're amazing. I admire you. When Li Yundong saw this woman, he was surprised and surprised. Aren't you Main Yang? Why are you here? Main Yang pretended to be sad and hurt.
What?
Don't you want me to come? Well, forget it. I'm old and faded. You, Boss Li, are young and rich. Naturally, you don't miss me. How can I compare to Xiaozhu, who is young, beautiful, and delicate? Boss Li only took one look at me, and you've been thinking about me ever since. When Li Yundong saw her pretending to speak, he couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He said, Main Yang, this is an important place of Taoism. It doesn't seem appropriate for you to come here, does it? Main Yang giggled and said with a hidden meaning, Oh, Boss Li, look at what you're saying. My subordinate's daughter can come here, but I can't? You also know that this is a Taoist temple? However, for you to be able to think of doing business here, I can't compare to your creativity. I, Main Yang, am willing to admit defeat. Besides, Xiaozhu is my red card. I rely on her to make a living. This is her first time coming out, so I have to keep an eye on her, right? Li Yundong was depressed in his heart. Well, she thought that he was going to come out and call her miss. But on second thought, he realized that he was calling her miss to come out. But what was even more depressing was that before he could open his mouth to answer Main Yang's words, he saw No Flower suddenly walk out of the house. When Xiaozhu, who was dressed in white and plain clothes, saw No Flower, she was immediately overjoyed and ran over. The two of them held hands and looked at each other with tearful eyes, looking like infatuated children. Both Li Yundong and Main Yang were dumbfounded. Li Yundong was a cultivator after all, so he quickly came to his senses. He unconsciously glanced at Zhou Qin and thought to himself, Zhou Qin guessed right. However, Main Yang couldn't help but say, I, Main Yang, made my debut at the age of 16. I've been doing business for so long. I've seen good people do good things, but I've never seen such a good thing. Boss Li, did you call Xiaozhu to come out just to let this monk take advantage of her? Li Yundong hadn't expected that Main Yang would also come. At this time, Main Yang's words almost made him vomit blood in his heart. I'm a dignified cultivator and the leader of the Fox Zen school. Now I have a little reputation, but I didn't expect to become a pimp today. If this gets out, it will be a big joke. I just wanted to find Master Wuhua to ask about Ao Wushuang's whereabouts. How could I have expected it to become like this? What the **CK is going on here? Merry Christmas, everyone. Chapter 321. Go to Watch Network. After hearing Main Yang's words, Li Yundong's face darkened, as if he were the reincarnation of the kitchen god. He remained silent with a dark face. Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the others of the Fox Zen school were all very sensitive people. When they saw Li Yundong's dark face, they all remained silent carefully. Only Main Yang looked at Wuhua and Xiaozhu and sighed. She said, I thought that you fell in love with Xiaozhu at first sight, but I didn't expect that you would let this monk take advantage of you. TSK, Boss Li, you are really pious. Li Yundong's face became darker and darker. He said in a deep voice, Don't talk nonsense. Master Wuhua is an eminent monk. He just wants to. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly saw Wuhua holding Xiaozhu's hand. The two of them walked into the room in pairs. When Master Wuhua entered the room, he turned around, grinned at Li Yundong, and then closed the door. Li Yundong's eyes widened and he couldn't help saying, Damn, what are you doing? Main Yang curled her lips and said casually, A young man and a young woman are alone in a room. What else can they do? TSK, Boss Li, are you still a virgin? Li Yundong flew into a rage out of humiliation. You talk too much. Do you think I don't know? But in his heart, he cursed. Even if Wuhua wants to convert this woman, don't make it so ambiguous, okay? Now I have a piece of mud in my crotch. Even if it's not sh*T, it's sh*T. Main Yang covered her mouth and looked Li Yundong up and down. Boss Li, are you really a virgin? Her eyes seemed to have seen a peerless treasure, an extinct creature. Li Yundong felt even more depressed. Before he could lose his temper, Su Chan, who was beside him, was unhappy. She couldn't help but say angrily, "You are really annoying. If you don't speak, no one will treat you as a mute." Zhou Qin also said with a cold face, "How much is the introduction fee? Take the money and leave." Li Yundong glared at Zhou Qin. "What introduction fee? This is not an introduction fee." Seeing that these people were angry, Meinyang quickly smiled and said, "Well, it's not an introduction. Boss Li, whatever you say. As long as you pay, everything is negotiable." Li Yundong said with a livid face, "How much?" "I'll pay." Lady Mei rolled her eyes and raised 2 fingers. "Fixed price, 2,000. 2,000. Zhou Qin and Su Chan shouted in unison. Zhou Qin said angrily, "Do you think you're a fairy from heaven? The appearance fee is 2,000 yuan? Meinyang said leisurely, "I don't think she's a fairy who came to the human world from heaven, but Xiao Zhu is indeed from the tavern Heaven on Earth. A while ago, the tavern Heaven on Earth was closed down, so Xiao Zhu went to Dongguan. Dongguan is now experiencing a typhoon, so she came to me." Zhou Qin was so angry that her face turned red. She raised her eyebrows and was about to scold him when Li Yundong quickly stopped her. He said impatiently, "Well, 2,000 is fine. Take the money and leave quickly. Watch net." After that, he counted 2,000 yuan and handed it to Meinyang. Then he ordered her to leave.
Count it.
"I won't give you a penny. Hurry up and go back to where you came from." Meinyang skillfully counted the money and then put it in her pocket. She smiled and said, "Boss Li, why are you so heartless? I came with Xiao Zhu, so I naturally have to go with her. Your Tianlong Taoist temple is quite famous. I'll look around today and take it as a trip." As she said this, she walked to other parts of the Taoist temple alone. When she reached the corner, she turned around and waved to Li Yundong.
Boss Li, don't worry about me.
"I'll just look around." Li Yundong was so angry at Meinyang that he was seething with anger. Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the others even cursed in the direction Meinyang had left. But at this time, the laughter of men and women came from the room again. Li Yundong and the others were all cultivators. Although the sound was soft, they could hear it very clearly. Chao Yi smiled awkwardly and said, "Master Wuhua is indeed an eminent monk. The way an eminent monk does things is indeed different." Although Zhou Qin hadn't started cultivating, the Yuanyin and Yuanyang qi in her body was not shallow. She also heard the voice clearly. As her cheeks turned slightly red, she sneered and said, "What eminent monk? I think he's a perverted monk, and he's the first perverted monk in history." Although Li Yundong somewhat agreed with Zhou Qin's words in his heart, he was asking Wuhua for help at this time. Subconsciously, he didn't want to see Wuhua as such a perverted person, so he scolded, "Zhou Qin, don't talk nonsense. Maybe he is really enlightening this woman." Zhou Qin was unconvinced and said, "Is there such a way? Unless this Master Wuhua is a Buddha of joy." Li Yundong pulled a long face and shouted at Zhou Qin, Su Chan, and the other foxes of the Foxen school who were watching the fun. "What are you all doing here? Go away. Are you eavesdropping?" As he shouted, some of the little foxes who had come to watch the fun quickly fled in all directions. Only Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Chao Yi, and the others followed Li Yundong away from the house. They went to see the net. 7K.O.M. Zhou Qin said to Li Yundong, "Master, it's not that I'm being mean, but I bet that this Wuhua must be a perverted monk." Li Yundong glanced at her and said angrily, "What are you betting on?" Zhou Qin snorted and said, "I bet it will take him a long time to come out." Li Yundong was stunned. "Why are you betting on this?" Zhou Qin said with a slightly red face, "A man and a woman alone in a room. What else can they do?" Only then did Li Yundong understand. He scolded with a smile, "Nonsense. Can you bet on such a thing?" As soon as he finished speaking, the room suddenly creaked. The door opened to the left and right, and Wuhua came out and walked straight toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong laughed, turned his head, and said to Zhou Qin in a low voice, "I told you that Master Wuhua is not a perverted monk. Look, isn't he coming out now?" Seeing Wu Hua walking toward him, he took 2 steps forward, put his palms together, and asked, "Master, what can I do for you?" Wu Hua's face was solemn. He put his palms together and stared at Li Yundong. He sighed but didn't say anything. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What's wrong? Is there anything you're not satisfied with?" Wu Hua shook his head but still didn't speak. Li Yundong couldn't help looking back at Zhou Qin, asking her with his eyes to see if she knew what Wu Hua was thinking. But Zhou Qin was also confused at this time. She didn't know why Wu Hua had come out. Zhou Qin shook her head at Li Yundong blankly, indicating that she didn't know. Seeing that Zhou Qin didn't know either, Li Yundong couldn't help but look at Su Chan, Chao Yi, and the others. He saw that they were also at a loss and shook their heads blankly. He was going crazy in his heart and thought, "You bald donkey, you always pretend to be mysterious all day long. If you have something to say, can't you just say it? Just say what you want. If you want a lady, I will find her for you." Li Yundong suppressed his anger and bowed to Master Wu Hua with his palms together. "Master, if you have something to say, just say it."
I will do it if I can.
Wu Hua let out a long sigh and said, "Zhenren, you helped me find Xiaozhu. I was so grateful. I wanted to talk about the old days with her, but I didn't expect." Seeing that he was stuck at the critical moment, Li Yundong hurriedly asked, "What didn't you expect?" Wu Hua sighed regretfully and said, "I didn't expect that there was no condom." As he said this, Wu Hua looked at Li Yundong eagerly and seriously. "Zhenren, do you have a condom?" F***CK. Li Yundong and the others were so shocked that they almost died. Li Yundong's eyes widened, and he couldn't speak for a long time. Zhou Qin's expression was strange, and the corners of her mouth twitched. It seemed that she wanted to laugh, but she tried her best to hold it back and didn't dare to. Chao Yi's expression was even more strange. She glanced at Li Yundong, then quickly turned around, covering her mouth with her hand and shrugging her shoulders. Su Chan didn't understand at first, but she quickly realized what was going on. Her face flushed red, and she burst out laughing. As soon as she laughed, she saw Li Yundong and Wu Hua looking at her at the same time. Su Chan quickly covered her mouth with her hands and opened her eyes wide. She looked at Li Yundong and then at Wu Hua. Li Yundong's eyes were full of resentment, but Wu Hua looked at her in confusion and asked, "Benefactress, what are you laughing at?" Su Chan didn't dare to speak. She was afraid that as soon as she opened her mouth, she would laugh herself to death. The little girl quickly shook her head like a rattle. Wu Hua sighed and said, "Buddha said that there is no self, no living beings." "Benefactress, do you know what this means?" "You are obsessed." Li Yundong was already convinced that Wu Hua was a lascivious monk. He was full of resentment and thought angrily, "F***CK, you are obviously the first lascivious monk since ancient times. Why are you still pretending to be an eminent monk? I've discovered it. Could it be that you're an eminent monk among the perverted monks, a perverted monk among eminent monks?" Li Yundong pulled a long face and said, "Master Wu Hua, I only know the Anata set and the Anata set." Wu Hua looked surprised. "What does that mean?" Li Yundong said with a black face, "It means that I don't have a set here, and no one else has one either." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Chao Yi, and the others couldn't help laughing out loud. However, as soon as they laughed out loud, they felt that it was inappropriate and quickly covered their mouths, almost breaking their intestines. Chao Yi tried hard to hold back her laughter and said to Li Yundong, "Leader, I still have some things to do. Before she could finish her words, she turned around and left. As she walked, she shrugged her shoulders and burst into laughter. Li Yundong glanced at Chao Yi's back and saw that Su Chan and Zhou Qin had been holding back for a while, but in the end, they couldn't help it. One was squatting on the ground, and the other was shaking with laughter. Li Yundong glared at them and said, "What are you laughing at?" Hearing a shout, Su Chan and Zhou Qin gasped and stopped laughing at the same time. However, their bodies were trembling, their eyebrows were twitching, the corners of their eyes were twitching, and their faces were so distorted that it was almost unrecognizable. Seeing them like this, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing out loud. He waved his hand and shouted, "Get out of here and laugh." Su Chan and Zhou Qin felt as if they had been pardoned. They quickly ran away and disappeared. After a while, there was a burst of wild laughter. Li Yundong looked in the direction in which the two of them had gone, feeling angry and amused. He turned around and sighed helplessly at Wu Hua, saying, "Master, I don't know if you are deliberately torturing me or something, but for the sake of my sincerity, please don't play with me. Tell me where Ao Wushuang is." Wu Hua chuckled, put his palms together, and said, "I didn't deliberately torment you. I just did whatever I thought of. You Taoists say that cultivation is unhindered, and we Buddhists also say that we can do whatever we want. You may think that I am a lascivious monk, but that's normal. Since I started cultivating, I have always been reckless. Not only did I change the name that my master gave me, but I also went to all kinds of entertainment places. I really don't look like a monk. Hee hee, others laugh at me for being too crazy, but I laugh at them for not seeing through me. You want to ask about Ao Wushuang's whereabouts, don't you? It's very simple. I can tell you now." Li Yundong was overjoyed and quickly asked, "Where is she?" Wu Hua said meaningfully, "She's far away, but close at hand." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yundong heard an extremely frightened and shrill scream coming from the direction of the Taoist temple. Chapter 322. Go to watch net. As soon as Li Yundong heard this voice, he was shocked and immediately ran to the place where the voice came from. Go to watch net. 7 km. When he arrived at the scene, Li Yundong took a look and immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He was shocked and angry. There was a coffin in the southwest corner of the Taoist temple. On the coffin was the memorial tablet of the former leader, Liu Yi. However, the lid of the coffin had been pushed open, and it was empty inside. Next to the coffin lay the bodies of two women, one near and one far away. They had been squeezed dry, and their faces were haggard, like mummies that had been dried for thousands of years. They looked extremely horrible. Li Yundong saw that the one in the distance was wearing revealing and sexy clothes. Her clothes were a little messy. From her clothes, he could tell that this person was Mei Nyang, and the one close by was wearing a Taoist robe. She was probably a disciple of the Foxen school, but because her body had been squeezed dry, her face was very different, so Li Yundong couldn't tell who she was for a while. But before long, Su Chan, Chao Yi, and the others also arrived. When Chao Yi saw the scene, she was so shocked that her eyes widened and she cried out involuntarily, "Fourth Shiji." Zhou Qin didn't know how to control herself, so she just ran over and was the last one to arrive. When she arrived, everyone from the Foxen school had already arrived. She looked at the scene and was shocked. She couldn't help covering her mouth, her face full of horror. Li Yundong looked at Chao Yi with a livid face. "Is this Zhang Sun Hong?" Chao Yi was frightened and said in a trembling voice, "This is my fourth Shiji's clothes. Look at the belt. There is a yellow brocade pouch next to it. This is my fourth Shiji's powerful magical weapon, the colorful brocade pouch." Li Yundong was shocked and angry. He hadn't expected that after he took over the sect, someone would kill his disciples under his nose, and there were outsiders around. Li Yundong glanced at Mei Nyang, who had also been squeezed dry. He turned to Wu Hua, who was constantly chanting scriptures with his palms together, and said, "Master, you just said that it's far away, but close at hand. Is it referring to what's happening right now?" Wu Hua lowered his eyes and said, "Ba. I can't say it. I can't say it." Li Yundong said angrily, "Do you still want to play tricks on me? Don't you know the fate connection? Don't tell me you don't know the ins and outs of this matter?" Wu Hua laughed hoarsely. "Generally, if I knew everything in this world, I would have become a Buddha long ago. Even Buddha himself couldn't see through all the confusing things in this world with a pair of eyes, let alone me. I could only see a tiny bit of it. You cultivators who practice Taoist techniques can't kill people with magic. It's the same for me. I can't completely reveal the secrets of heaven. Otherwise, there will be a heavenly tribulation. Watch net. Only then did Li Yunyang's anger dissipate a lot. He glanced around and saw that all the disciples of the Fox Zen school had expressions of fear on their faces. Those who were on good terms with Zhang Sun Hong were even secretly wiping tears. Li Yundong's face was livid, and he was speechless for a moment. However, Zhou Qin gently pulled his arm and whispered, "Master, should we call the police?" "Call the police?" Li Yundong sneered.
How?
"What should I say to the police? Do you want to be reconciled?" Li Yundong's eyes were sharp as he glanced at Chao Yi and asked, "Why is the coffin of the former leader here?" Chao Yi looked at Zhang Sun Hong's body and secretly shed tears. When she heard Li Yundong's question, she quickly wiped away her tears and said, "Today is the 7th day of the former leader's death. We elders of the Fox Zen School had a private discussion and decided to pay our respects to the former leader. However, we were afraid that you would think too much, so we didn't tell you. After you came back, I wanted Zhang Sun Hong to come with us to see you, but she said that she couldn't be alone here and that she could just stay here, so she didn't come with us." Speaking of this, Chao Yi couldn't help but burst into tears. "It's all my fault. If I hadn't agreed to her request, she wouldn't have died." As soon as she cried, the other disciples of the Fox Zen School who had been with Zhang Sun Hong all day long also burst into tears. For a moment, the backyard was filled with cries, and the atmosphere was gloomy. Although Su Chan had left the Fox Zen School since she was a child, she still grieved for her own kind. When she saw that her Sherbwa had been killed, she couldn't help but cry. Li Yundong flew into a rage and shouted, "Bastard!" No one knew whether he was scolding the crying disciples or the murderer, but after he shouted, the crying suddenly stopped. The disciples of the Fox Zen School were so scared that they only dared to sob in a low voice. Watch net. Su Chan had rarely seen him so angry. She carefully pulled his sleeve with her hand and whispered, "Yun. Leader, don't be angry." His heart softened, and his voice softened a lot. He sighed and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself. I didn't protect you well. I'm not qualified to be the leader of the sect." As soon as he said this, Chao Yi and the others said one after another, "Leader, if you say that, we will be ashamed." "Yes, sect leader, this matter is not your fault. I don't know which vicious cultivator killed 4th Sherbwa." Li Yundong looked at Wu Hua and asked, "Master Wu Hua, do you really not know who killed my disciple Zhang Sun Hong?" Wu Hua put his palms together and said, "Generally, a monk doesn't lie. I really don't know. But what I know is that if you find the murderer, you will find the whereabouts of Ao Wushuang." Li Yundong clenched his fists and secretly remembered what he had said. Suddenly, his eyes fell on Mei Nyang, and he couldn't help but feel a headache. Now this woman died in our Taoist temple, and her death is so bizarre. What should we do? If the police find out, there will be trouble. He was frowning when he suddenly heard a timid voice beside him. "I have a way." When everyone heard this, they immediately looked in the direction of the voice and saw that it was Xiao Zhu, who had come with Mei Nyang. Xiao Zhu hid behind Wu Hua timidly and whispered, "Mei Nyang doesn't have any relatives. I can go back and say that she has gone back to her hometown. She usually treats people very harshly, so no one will ask about her whereabouts." Li Yundong was a little surprised to see that Xiao Zhu, an ordinary person, dared to speak boldly in front of such a scene. He couldn't help but take another look at her, nodded to her and said, "Although this is the only thing we can do right now, this is a living life after all. I, Li Yundong, will definitely find a way to help Mei Nyang's soul in heaven find the murderer." When Xiao Zhu saw him looking at her, she was so scared that she quickly hid behind Wu Hua, not daring to speak again. Chao Yi looked at Mei Nyang's body and couldn't help laughing bitterly. Her body has been sucked dry, and her soul must have been sucked away. She has no soul in heaven for a long time. When Li Yundong heard this, he suddenly shivered. He suddenly widened his eyes and said, "I remember that Yi was once hit by Mo Ashi's threaded hairpin of soul traversal. Wasn't her flesh and blood sucked away and her soul devoured?" Su Chan, who was standing to one side, also said loudly, "Yes, yes, I remember Mo Ashi." No, When Yan Fong and second Sherpa Gu Feng made love, Yan Fong used the threaded hairpin of soul traversal to kill Gu Feng and sucked his flesh and soul dry. Could it be that these two people are also like this? Li Yundong couldn't help but say in surprise. Could it be that Yan Fong has taken the threaded hairpin of soul traversal and has been lurking in this Taoist temple? As soon as his voice fell, everyone couldn't help but shiver. Although Yan Fong had lost her physical body and could not use powerful magic, her forbearance and ferocity were really chilling. If it was really her, there was no one in the Fox Zen school who wouldn't shiver and be afraid except for Li Yundong. From Chao Yi and the other older generation to Su Chan and the other younger generation of the Fox Zen school, they couldn't help thinking, if Yan Fong is by my side then. For a moment, when the people of the Fox Zen school thought of this, they all looked terrified. Fortunately, Chao Yi was still calm. She calmed down a little and said in a hoarse voice, "Leader, wasn't the threaded hairpin of soul traversal taken away last time?" Li Yundong asked, "Could it have been Yan Fong who did it?" Chao Yi shook her head and said, "Last time, it was a gust of black smoke that took away the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. This kind of kung fu of transforming form into qi can only be performed with a physical body. At that time, Yan Fong's yang spirit was out of her body, so she didn't have this ability. Judging from the situation at that time, Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua, is the most suspicious." As soon as Li Yundong heard Zheng Yuan's name, he couldn't help but say angrily, "This be ****. We had a grudge against him last time. How dare he take the initiative to come to us this time? Isn't he afraid that I will destroy the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua?" Su Chan also said with red eyes, "Yes, it must be him. Last time we messed up his plan, so this time he sneaked into our Fox Zen school to kill people and take our treasures to vent his anger." Li Yundong was stunned. "Take treasures? What treasures?" Su Chan pointed to the coffin and said angrily, "The coffin of the former leader has been opened, and his body and powerful magical weapon are gone. If this isn't killing people and taking their treasures, then what is?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he looked pensive. He thought for a moment and said, "Since it's killing people and taking their treasures, why didn't they take Zhang Sun Hong's colorful brocade pouch?" Chao Yi sighed and said, "The powerful magical weapon of the former leader is the Heaven and Earth Jasper Pole, which is one of the top treasures in the world. If the gangster wanted to take the treasure, he would naturally not take a fancy to a powerful magical weapon like Fourth Shiji's. Fourth Shiji's is just a small powerful magical weapon. The 2 brocade pouches I gave to you last time are only one-time use, but such a powerful magical weapon is permanent. Not only can it carry a large number of things with it, but it will never be damaged." Hearing this, Li Yundong frowned and asked again, "Then can you tell if the scream you heard just now was from Zhang Sun Hong?" Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong, Zhuang Yuting, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. Li Yundong's frown deepened, and he didn't speak for a moment. Wu Hua, who was standing to one side, suddenly said to Li Yundong, "Jinren Li, such a big thing has happened to your sect. I'd better not stay any longer. I'd better leave first." Li Yundong didn't want to keep him at this time, so he said to Wu Hua, "I wanted to invite you to stay for a meal, but now that such a thing has happened to our Fox Zen school, my heart is in a mess. I'm not in the mood to accompany you anymore, so I can only apologize." Wu Hua put his palms together and bowed. "It doesn't matter. However, Jinren Li, you have to pay more attention. Everything in this world is always connected by cause and effect. Even if there is no wind, there must be a reason. That's all I have to say. I hope it will be of help to you." After that, he turned around, patted Xiao Zhu on the shoulder, and led her out of the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong watched him leave, and his eyes were a little confused for a moment. He pondered over the words left by No Hua over and over again. He seemed to understand something in his heart, but more fog rushed toward him, almost drowning him. Chapter 323. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong pondered for a while. then raised his head and said to Chao Yi and the others of the Fox Sun School, "You take the other disciples to your room first. Everyone stay together and don't separate. Go to the Fox Sun School." Chao Yi nodded and left the place with Shuang Yiting and Lu Yuehong with the little foxes of the Fox Sun School. As soon as they left, the sound of chattering and crying suddenly disappeared. For a moment, the backyard was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Suchan saw that the coffin was open and there were 2 dried corpses lying on the ground. The surroundings were so quiet that she couldn't help but feel a little scared. She couldn't help but move closer to Li Yundong and tug at the corner of his clothes. "Yundong, why did you ask Sherbua and the others to leave?" Li Yundong glanced at her and stroked her head. He didn't answer, but turned to look at Zhou Qin. "What do you think?" Zhou Qin glanced at Li Yundong and knew that he was both asking and testing her, so she said, "I have some ideas, but I don't know if I can tell you." Li Yundong said, "There are only me and Su Chan here. There are no outsiders, so there's nothing to worry about. Go ahead." Zhou Qin looked at Su Chan and seemed to be very worried. She said, "Su Chan, if there's anything wrong with my words, don't take it to heart." Su Chan blinked her eyes in confusion. "No, I won't. As the saying goes, 1 person is short of wisdom, but 2 is long. Sister Zhou Qin, tell me." Zhou Qin nodded and said, "Then I'll say it. Master, I think this matter is very strange." Li Yundong asked, "What's strange about it?" Zhou Qin said, "Why did something happen to the Fox Sun School when Master Wuhua came? Why did someone die just as he was about to tell us where Ao Wushuang was? If this is a coincidence, then it's too much of a coincidence." Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, "I also think this matter is very strange. Master Wuhua just told me that Zhang Sunhong was dead, and Mei Nyang was also dead." Zhou Qin nodded and said, "Yes, and Master, did you find anything strange about the position of their bodies?" Li Yundong couldn't help but look at Zhou Qin and say with admiration, "You're right. In my opinion, this murderer should have killed Zhang Sunhong first. Then, when Mei Nyang was wandering around, she suddenly broke in here and saw this scene. Then, she let out a shrill scream. Then, in order to silence her, the murderer killed Mei Nyang. Watch net." At this time, Su Chan interrupted, "This murderer is so cruel.
Not only did he kill them, but he also sucked them dry.
He didn't even let go of their souls." Li Yundong smiled gently at Su Chan and said, "That's exactly what I wanted to say. If the murderer wanted to kill someone, then he could have just killed Mei Nyang. Why did he have to suck her dry, and even her soul? Why was he so cruel?" Su Chan couldn't help but glance at the 2 dried corpses on the ground, then quickly turned her face away. With a look of fear and disgust, she said, "Maybe this murderer is a big pervert." Li Yundong shook his head and said, "Whether he's a pervert or not is another matter, but I don't think it's a coincidence that both of them were sucked dry." Zhou Qin suddenly said, "Although I don't know how to cultivate, is it possible that the murderer was afraid that if he didn't suck the other's soul, the soul might be able to tell us the murderer's name and appearance in the future? So the murderer was worried about this, so..." Li Yundong raised his eyebrows and said, "Your idea is very good. It's very possible. However, it was not an easy task to turn a person into jerky in such a short period of time, and even suck away a person's soul. As far as the current situation is concerned, Zheng Yuan is very suspicious. However, there is another reason why I sent the others of the Fox Sun School away." Su Chan and Zhou Qin asked in unison, "What reason?" Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "I suspect that there is a traitor in the Fox Sun School." Hearing Li Yundong's words, Zhou Qin raised her eyebrows. At first, she was a little surprised, but she quickly reacted and showed a thoughtful expression. Su Chan was so surprised that she gasped,
"Ah?
It can't be, right?" Su Chan knew the cause and effect of the siege of the Fox Sun School. In her opinion, the main reason why the Fox Sun School had suffered such a heavy blow this time was that Imo Ashi and the others had lurked in the Fox Sun School and become traitors, collaborating with the major sections. But now that Su Chan had heard that there was a traitor in the Foxen school, she was not only shocked but also scared. For a moment, she was in a panic. The little girl grabbed Li Yundong's sleeve tightly and leaned against him. She said with a frightened expression, "Yundong, why do you say that?" Li Yundong pointed to where Zhang Sunhong was and said, "Although Zhang Sunhong is not good at fighting, I heard from Chao Yi that they are all very good at invisibility, illusion, and all kinds of charm techniques. Although they can't beat people, they can escape. Go to the internet." 7KOM. And the scream from before was from Mei Nyang, not Zhang Sunhong. This means that the culprit's cultivation is either too much higher than Zhang Sunhong's, or it's someone she knows who suddenly attacked her when she was off guard. Su Chan let out a cry and clenched her fists. She stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open.
Who could it be?
Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "I don't know yet, but from what we can see, we can infer a few things. First, the person who killed Zhang Sunhong may be very familiar with her, or his cultivation is much higher than hers. Secondly, we don't know if this person is here to kill us for our treasures or to seek revenge. However, if he's here to seek revenge, then he doesn't have to squeeze Mei Nyang dry. He could just come and find trouble with us openly." At this time, Su Chan interrupted. Would he dare? Doesn't he know that our leader, Zhenren Li, is good at fighting and invincible? Li Yundong chuckled and glared at Su Chan, pretending to be angry. Nonsense. There are so many cultivators in the world. How can I be invincible? Li Yundong rubbed the little girl's head and continued, "Between killing for the treasure and seeking revenge, I prefer the former. Only those who kill for the treasure are really afraid that the other party will know who took the powerful magical weapon. But there's also something suspicious about this." Before he could finish speaking, Zhou Qin nodded and said, "Indeed, if he wanted to snatch the treasure, why did he want to snatch the body of the former leader, Liu Yi? By the way, could it be that the former leader ascended by himself, so his body was not left behind?" Hearing this, Li Yundong laughed. He shook his head and said, "No, Liu Yi died of serious injuries. In this case, it's impossible for him to ascend." Su Chan suddenly said in fear, "Could it be that the leader has been resurrected?" Li Yundong was stunned, but then he shook his head and said, "I don't think so. Why would Liu Yi kill his own disciple? And I saw the injury he suffered last time. It was a serious injury that could not have been more fatal." As he spoke, Su Chan and Zhou Qin couldn't help frowning and saying in unison, "Then who is it?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Su Chan, let me say something. Don't think too much. Ever since I took over the Foxen school, I have found that there is an inexplicable atmosphere in the school. Especially what happened today, there is an evil aura. I think there must be someone secretly watching our Foxen school with evil intentions." Su Chan looked worried. "Yundong, I'm the one who has dragged you down. Why don't you quit being the leader of the Foxen school? Don't let the affairs of our sect implicate you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Don't be silly. How can you retreat when you encounter difficulties and run away when you see an enemy? Whether this person is a foreign enemy or a traitor, I believe that sooner or later he will reveal his true identity. If he is a traitor, I don't believe that he won't reveal his fox tail." This sentence was so appropriate that Su Chan couldn't help muttering a few words. She subconsciously touched her back, as if she was afraid that she would show her fox tail now. Li Yundong looked at the little girl and said with a smile, "I'm not talking about you. What are you worried about?" Su Chan pouted and said, "I'm worried that you will suspect me." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Even if all the people in the world are dead, I won't suspect you. Don't be silly." When the little girl heard this, she immediately beamed. She held Li Yundong's arm and was about to act coquettishly. Li Yundong quickly coughed and said, "How dare you? Is this a place to play?" Only then did the little girl remember that she was still at the scene of the murder. She stuck out her tongue and then carefully peeked at Zhou Qin. She saw that the girl's face was motionless, and there was no trace of emotion between her and Li Yundong's eyebrows, as if she was not unhappy at all because of her and Li Yundong's frolicking. Su Chan secretly felt relieved. She knew that Zhou Qin was extremely talented and would definitely be a strong help to Li Yundong in the future. Although she was Li Yundong's doting girlfriend, Zhou Qin would definitely be Li Yundong's first disciple. She didn't want to be at odds with her. Li Yundong didn't notice the little girl's mentality. He said, "For now, it seems that we can't stay in Tianlong Mountain anymore. This place is too large, and it's easy for murderers to take advantage of it. Moreover, I can't keep an eye on this place all day long." Zhou Qin asked, "Then where do you want them to go? To the secret chamber of the Fox Zen School?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No. If there is really a traitor, it would be equivalent to telling the other party about the existence of the heavenly Jindan technique. I want them to temporarily live in Hongxing New area, where I live." Zhou Qin couldn't help but open her mouth wide with a strange look on her face. "So many female disciples are going to live in your place?
Can you stand it?"
There was a double meaning in her words. Li Yundong couldn't help but glare at her. "Do you think I'm also a Buddha of joy? I'm letting them live there, and I'll take Su Chan to another place to live." Zhou Qin's cheeks turned slightly red, and she said with a dry smile, "I mean, don't you think they're noisy?" Li Yundong was not willing to believe her explanation. He just rolled his eyes at her and said, "Now, come with me to the secret chamber of the Fox Zen School. Su Chan, go into the room and get a pen and paper. Zhou Qin, you go too. Each of you make a copy of the heavenly Jindan technique, and then I'll find a way to seal this secret chamber. Then we'll go back to Tianan City together." Su Chan and Zhou Qin turned around and went back into the house to look for pen and paper. Li Yundong, on the other hand, was pacing back and forth at the crime scene with a frown on his face. After a while, Su Chan and Zhou Qin came out of the house. Li Yundong put his hand on Zhou Qin's wrist and nodded to her. The three of them rose up. When Li Yundong took the two of them to the entrance of the secret chamber halfway up the mountain of the Fox Zen School, Li Yundong suddenly found that the branches and leaves at the entrance of the cave had been pushed aside, revealing an obvious entrance. This was no trivial matter. Li Yundong winked at Su Chan, asking her to take Zhou Qin and fly a little further down. He took a deep breath, pushed aside the branches and leaves at the entrance of the cave, and walked in himself. Li Yundong held his breath and concentrated. He walked lightly and slowly along the way, almost like a civet, not making a single sound. When he was about to enter the secret chamber, he clearly heard a faint, almost inaudible rustling sound coming from inside. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He knew that this person was probably the murderer, and Ao Wushuang's whereabouts were very likely to be related to him. He didn't hesitate any longer and rushed in fiercely. Chapter 324. Go to WatchNet. Li Yundong's rush was fast and sudden. The moment he rushed into the stone room, he suddenly saw a short and thin man standing in the stone room. He was holding a torch in one hand and looking up at the words on the wall. Go to WatchNet. 7th KOM. Li Yundong looked over and suddenly felt that this person's figure was very familiar. He shouted, "Who is it?" This loud shout shook the rocks in the stone room. The short and thin man suddenly turned his head, but at the moment he turned his head, he seemed to find that something was wrong. He immediately raised his hand and covered his face with his sleeve. His body quickly turned into a blue light and rushed straight toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong shouted, "Come on." After that, his qi and blood surged all over his body, and the Jin qi rushed out. He pinched his fingers and made a fixed fundamental seal, which was like an avalanche. At this time, Li Yundong's cultivation quotient had reached the middle phase of a sixth heaven of the Huanying phase. As long as he cultivated the supreme Yin Qi from the Yang Qi, he could transform from the Yin spirit to the Yang spirit and reach the top phase of the sixth heaven, the Huanying phase. The power of his Mahamudra was even greater than when he was fighting with people under the siege of the 6 major sections. There was a strong golden light in his palm. It was obvious that his Yang Qi had become unbelievably strong. The man who was rushing toward Li Yundong didn't dare to take it head-on. With a strange cry, He twisted his body and went around Li Yundong's palm in an extremely strange way, like a slippery loach. Li Yundong saw that the man had bypassed his attack and rushed in front of him. He shouted and punched out. This punch seemed ordinary, but its power was comparable to that of a mountain-splitting axe. Even if the iron Luohan was hit by this punch, it would be turned into a lump of scrap iron. Li Yundong's punch was fierce and fast. It was impossible for ordinary cultivators to dodge it. However, the man's feet suddenly moved again. His body seemed to have no bones, and his body slid to the side against Li Yundong's arm. This time, the enemy was on his back, and Li Yundong's waist and abdomen were within the enemy's attack range. He was shocked and thought to himself, why is this person's body movement so strange? Although Li Yundong had missed twice in a row, his kung fu in the face of the enemy was extremely amazing. Without thinking about it, he immediately lowered the qi all over his body. The qi of the upper dantian in his head surged down like a waterfall. He crossed his arms and pressed them down. His body shook violently, like a black bear shaking off lice. This move was the heaven and earth embrace that Li Yundong had secretly learned from Zhang Tianhe. This was equivalent to connecting all the qi in his body and spreading it densely to every part of his body. In an instant, he had an extremely strong ability to resist attacks. As Li Yundong pressed down, the ground under his feet shook. The air around him surged violently, like a majestic wave, blowing away the person who was close to him in an instant. Watch net. 7KOM. However, this person didn't seem to have any intention of fighting with Li Yundong at all. He took advantage of Li Yundong's moment to jump into the tunnel. Li Yundong thought to himself, oh no, he's trying to escape. Li Yundong stopped in his tracks and chased after him. Although he was fast, he couldn't compare to the person in front of him. In the blink of an eye, the two of them rushed out of the tunnel. As soon as they were out of the tunnel, the man immediately turned into a blue light and left like lightning. Su Chan was floating in the air with Zhou Qin. Seeing Li Yundong chasing after her, she hurried over to meet him. Su Chan asked nervously, Yundong, are you okay? Who was that person? Li Yundong looked hatefully in the direction where the man had gone and said, I'm fine. I don't know who this person is, but from the situation of the fight just now, this person's body method is strange and cunning. I've only seen it in one person. Su Chan quickly asked, who? Li Yundong said in a deep voice, the former leader of the Fox Zen school, Lu Yi. Su Chan was shocked. Impossible. Isn't he dead? Li Yundong pondered for a while, his face surprisingly cold. I'm not sure. Maybe there are many people in the world with such strange footwork. However, the only thing I can be sure of is that the secret room of our Fox Zen school has been exposed. Hurry up and copy the Heavenly Jindan technique. I want to seal this secret room. Su Chan nodded, turned her head, and looked at Zhou Qin. The two of them quickly flew into the stone cave. At the entrance of the cave, Su Chan looked at Li Yundong, who was floating outside the cave and didn't come in. She asked, aren't you coming in? Li Yundong shook his head and said, now the enemy's situation is unknown. I'll help you keep a lookout outside. Hurry up. Su Chan, if you find anything wrong, warn us as soon as possible. Su Chan nodded obediently. The two of them turned around and entered the cave. It was not the first time that they had entered this stone cave. Su Chan said to Zhou Qin, Sister Zhou Qin, you copy the big characters, and I'll copy the small ones. Zhou Qin nodded and said, well, it'll be faster this way. The two of them divided the work and copied the Heavenly Jindan technique, and then carefully compared it. After confirming that there were no mistakes, they came out of the cave. Watch net. 7th KOM. When Li Yundong saw them coming out, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at them and asked, are you okay? Seeing that he was so worried about her, Su Chan smiled sweetly and said, what's wrong? Zhou Qin also nodded and said, it's okay. It's all copied, word for word. Then, she handed the manuscript in her hand to Li Yundong. Li Yundong waved his hand. You guys stay here. However, Zhou Qin refused to take her hand back. She said, as the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but he will get into trouble because of his wealth. I don't know much about cultivation, but I can tell that this must be some kind of amazing cultivation manual. If others find out that we have such a treasure, we'll be in big trouble. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He reached out to take the manuscript and put it in his arms. He nodded and praised Zhou Qin, saying, "You're really thoughtful. You're right. If this thing gets out, I'm afraid it will immediately cause a bloody storm." As he said this, he suddenly sighed and said, "However, maybe the heavenly Jindan technique has already been spread out. I don't know how much the person in the stone room has memorized." Su Chan's face was full of worry. "Yundong, will there be many sects coming to make trouble for us?" Seeing that the little girl was so worried, Li Yundong felt tender in his heart. He stroked the little girl's black and soft head with his hand and said with a heroic smile, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. If I can beat them back once, I can beat them back twice. How can our Fox Zen school be at the mercy of others?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong, her heart full of love and attachment. She couldn't help but think to herself, half a year ago, he still needed me to protect him. Now he's here to protect me and my sect. Li Yundong patted the little girl on the shoulder with a smile and said, "Take Zhou Qin outside and hide somewhere far away." Su Chan was a little confused, but she had always been obedient to Li Yundong and would do whatever he said. She flew with Zhou Qin more than 10 meters away with her qi and looked at Li Yundong. Li Yundong also flew out of the cave with his qi and flew to the top of the cave. Then, he suddenly used his qi and his body crackled, as if a string of firecrackers had been set off. His body suddenly swelled, his arms became as thick as his legs, and his thighs became as thick as his waist. The muscles all over his body bulged, like a Vajra warrior descending to the world. Zhou Qin and Su Chan had never seen Li Yundong use such magic before, so they were so shocked that their eyes widened. Li Yundong suddenly raised his arms, and then his fists, like two iron hammers, smashed against the mountain wall. With a loud bang, the mountains and the earth trembled violently. With a crash, countless boulders fell down, instantly blocking the passageway tightly. Su Chan and Zhou Qin saw a boulder rolling down the mountain and smashing toward Li Yundong's head. They both exclaimed at the same time, "Be careful." This boulder was the size of 4 or 5 millstones and weighed thousands of kilograms. If it hit a person, they would immediately turn into meat paste. Li Yundong heard their exclamations and looked up, but he did not panic. He just took a deep breath, waved his arm, and smashed the boulder with his flesh and blood. Like a baseball player swinging a bat, he smashed the boulder into the sealed entrance of the cave. With a loud bang, the rubble sank deeply. At this time, the shaking of Tianlong Mountain stopped, and only scattered rubble continued to fall. At this time, both Su Chan and Zhou Qin were dumbfounded. Zhou Qin knew that Li Yundong was a cultivator and knew all kinds of incredible magic, but she had never thought that Li Yundong could be so strong. Just now, the boulder that weighed thousands of kilograms had been blasted into the entrance of the cave like a cannonball, as if the boulder was just a small mud ball. Zhou Qin was so shocked that the hair on her back stood on end. She stammered, "Can a human be so strong? Is he still a human?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong with admiration in her eyes and said, "Li Yundong is only 2 steps away from becoming a great cultivator. When he reaches the realm of immortal Jinshin, he will be even more powerful. At that time, he will have earth-shattering power with every move, and he will be no different from a true immortal or true god." Zhou Qin was even more shocked. She thought to herself, "I knew that Li Yundong was very strong, but I didn't expect him to be so strong. I don't know how long it will take me to catch up with him." Su Chan also thought to herself, "Yundong's cultivation speed is too fast. He has already far surpassed me. I have to work harder, or I will become a burden." After Li Yundong sealed the entrance of the cave, he flew towards Su Chan and Zhou Qin. As soon as he got close, He saw Su Chan asking curiously with a look of admiration on her face. Yundong, you are so powerful. What magic did you use just now? Why is it so powerful? I thought that our Tianlong mountain was going to be destroyed by you just now. Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "This is the Heavenly Jindan technique." Su Chan asked curiously, "Is the Heavenly Jindan technique so magical? It can make you so burly, like a strong man of the heavenly court?" Li Yundong explained, "When the Heavenly Jindan technique is cultivated to the 5th, 6th, and 7th turns, the bones, flesh, and internal organs of the human body can be changed, which is equivalent to reconstructing the human body. When the 7th turn is cultivated, it is equivalent to obtaining a second life, so that the human body can break through the limits of the human body and freely control the growth of the bones and flesh in the human body." Su Chan said excitedly, "I used to hear from my master that there were great cultivators who could cultivate 3 heads and 6 arms. At that time, I thought it was a lie, but I didn't expect it to be true. Yundong, can you cultivate 3 heads and 6 arms?" Li Yundong laughed and shook his head.
Not yet.
The cultivation method of the Heavenly Jindan technique is different from the ordinary cultivation method of the 9 heavens. It mainly trains courage, then stimulates the flesh and blood, and stimulates the metabolism of the human body, so that people can become saints. If I want to cultivate 3 heads and 6 arms, I must cultivate to the 9th turn. I have only cultivated to the 7th turn now, and I am still 2 levels away from the 9th turn. Su Chan smiled and said, "It's only 2 levels. It's very fast. When you learn it well, you have to teach me." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "In the way of cultivation, it's normal to advance 1,000 miles at the beginning, but the further you go, the slower your cultivation speed will be." Ziyuan herself is a genius and is known as the #1 expert of the younger generation in the cultivation world. But after she reached the Yuanying phase, it was difficult for her to make any further progress. It can be seen how difficult the later cultivation will be. Su Chan smiled and said coquettishly, "I don't care. Anyway, you have to teach me." Li Yundong smiled at her lovingly and said, Okay. When we go back, I will teach you the Heavenly Jindan technique." As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at Zhou Qin, only to see that the girl was also staring at him, her eyes full of hope. Li Yundong smiled at Zhou Qin and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely teach you everything I know. I will not hide anything." When Zhou Qin heard this, she was overjoyed, and a heartfelt smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Li Yundong waved to Su Chan and Zhou Qin and said, "Let's go back. Don't waste time here." The 3 of them flew from the mountain to the Taoist temple. As soon as they landed in the backyard, Li Yundong heard a noise coming from the front of the Taoist temple. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Su Chan and Zhou Qin and said, "Let's go and see what's going on." He rushed to the front yard with the 2 of them, only to see Chao Yi and the others from the Fox Zen school confronting a group of people. These people were all dressed as tourists, and their leader was a young man in brown casual clothes and a brown cap on his head. The man shouted at Chao Yi angrily, "We have already bought tickets at the foot of Tianlong Mountain. Since this is a scenic spot, why can't you let us in? Is this Taoist temple your private property?" Li Yundong was stunned. Only then did he remember that the Taoist temple of the Fox Zen school was a tourist attraction. He was going back to his parents' home today. Chapter 325. Go to watch net. Li Yundong stepped forward and whispered to Chao Yi, "What's going on?" When Chao Yi saw him appear, she suddenly seemed to have found her backbone. She breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Leader, it's good that you're here. These people insisted on going to the backyard to have a look. I said no, so they quarreled with me. Go to watch net." Li Yundong couldn't help frowning. Normally, it wouldn't have mattered if these people had gone to the backyard. But now, 2 people had just died in his backyard, and these people had come to visit. Could it be such a coincidence? Among the group of tourists, the young man in the lead looked at Li Yundong and sneered.
Leader?
What era is this? Leader, do you think you're shooting a TV series? He stepped forward and shouted at Li Yundong, Hey, are you going to let us in or not? If you don't, I'll complain about you. As soon as he shouted, the tourists also began to clamor. Some of the excited tourists even cursed and used dirty words, which made Li Yundong and the others frown and get angry. Li Yundong frowned and said in a deep voice, I'm sorry, it's really not convenient for you to visit the backyard today. You can visit other places in the Taoist temple. The man turned around and shouted, We paid for it. Why can't you let us in? This person is too overbearing. And you didn't say that we couldn't enter before. Ignore him. Let's go in. Chao Yi and the others of the Fox Sun School were all in a mess. Although their cultivation quotients were not high, they would not show fear when facing people from the cultivation world. However, the people in front of them were all mortals. They didn't know how to deal with them, so they were in a dilemma for a while. Li Yundong frowned. He saw the young man in front of him rushing toward him. He stretched out his hand to block him, but suddenly, the young man turned his wrist. Using his body as a cover, he grabbed the joints of Li Yundong's wrist with one hand like hooks, and with the other hand, he poked at the lower dantian of Li Yundong's lower abdomen. This move was fast and hidden. The tourists behind the man couldn't see clearly because their vision was blocked by his body, but Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Chao Yi, and the other Shibua and disciples of the Fox Sun School could see it clearly. They had never thought that this tourist would be a cultivator. They all exclaimed, Be careful, shameless, despicable. However, Li Yundong seemed to have expected this. He flipped his wrist and put his 5 fingers on her wrist. His thumb, index finger, and middle finger accurately pressed on the Yanggu, Yangqi, and Yangshi acupoints on her hand.
Go.
7th K.O.M. In the past, when Sherneng had fought with Li Yundong, he had used this move to attack Li Yundong. This move was hidden and dangerous. Even if he didn't catch it, he could turn his wrist and continue to attack the other vital parts of the opponent's chest. He would use the grab as a poke and then launch a further attack. It was like a storm, and he would not stop until he defeated the opponent. However, Li Yundong chose to meet force with force. He used his fingers to break the man's finger bones and break his grasp. Now that Li Yundong had used Sherneng's move, its power was much greater than Sherneng's. The man who had attacked him felt as if his hand had been handcuffed, and he couldn't move at all. However, his other hand, which was poking at Li Yundong's lower dantian, was only an inch away from hitting his vital parts. The man gritted his teeth and simply gave up the hand that Li Yundong had grabbed. He poured all his strength and jinqi into the finger that was poking at Li Yundong's lower abdomen. At this time, Li Yundong's shintong had been completed, and his prophet's divine sense was extremely sharp. As long as others were hostile to him, he could immediately feel it. He could also guess what the other party was thinking and what they wanted to do. Li Yundong guessed that the other party had the idea of cutting off one of his arms in order to defeat the enemy. He smiled coldly, grabbed the 3 vital parts of the other party's Yangqi, Yanggu, and Yangshi and said in a low voice, Be careful, don't be so impulsive. Before he could finish his words, the man felt his whole body stiffen. Li Yundong's 3 fingers had buckled his 3 vital parts, and his qi had been blocked. His whole body was out of control, and his fingers were only a millimeter away from the vital parts of Li Yundong's lower dantian, but he couldn't poke any further. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, was relieved at this time. She was a sensitive and studious person. When she saw that Li Yundong had grabbed the other party's wrist, the other party seemed to have been immobilized and couldn't move at all. She couldn't help but ask, why can't he move when Li Yundong grabs his wrist? Seeing that Li Yundong had resolved the sneak attack, Su Chan patted her chest and explained in a low voice, as the saying goes, pull one part and the whole body moves. If I pull your head, if you don't want to feel pain, your whole body has to move. This is the reason why Yundong grabbed this person's wrist. Moreover, by grabbing the vital points on the other party's wrist, Yundong's true qi invaded his body and controlled his body. Therefore, the other party became like a puppet, unable to move at all. Only then did Zhou Qin come to a sudden realization. Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the others from the Fox Sen school had seen the fight between Li Yundong and the man, but the tourists hadn't seen it clearly. When they saw Li Yundong grab the man's hand, they shouted, "Hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to beat him up?" Before Li Yundong could say anything, Su Chan said angrily, "Hey, don't you have eyes?" He was the one who first. Li Yundong didn't want to expose the conflict between the two of them to the mortals of the secular world. He interrupted Su Chan and said, "Su Chan." Su Chan's words were interrupted by Li Yundong, and she couldn't help swallowing the rest of her words. She looked at Li Yundong, only to see him winking at her and looking at the backyard. Su Chan immediately understood and exchanged a look with Chao Yi. The two of them turned around and went to the backyard to clean up the bodies of Mei Nyang and Zhang Sunhong. Go to the internet. 7th KOM. Seeing that the two of them had understood what he meant, Li Yundong was relieved. He still held the man's wrist with one hand, lowered his voice, and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Which sect are you from?
Why did you sneak attack me?"
The man had a roguish expression on his face as he shouted, "Hey, why are you grabbing me? Hurry up and let go. I'm not gay." Hearing his shout, some of the tourists started to laugh. Li Yundong was angry in his heart, but he had a smile on his face. His zhenqi secretly surged out and surged into the man's body. The man suddenly felt as if thousands of sharp blades were cutting his meridians. The pain made him sweat profusely and unable to speak. However, his body was controlled by Li Yunyang and he couldn't resist at all. He couldn't hide or shout. The pain was really worse than death. Li Yundong grabbed his hand and said to the tourists with a smile, "It's really inconvenient for our Taoist temple today. Moreover, the backyard is also our own place to stay. There's nothing to see. I hope you can understand. Our Taoist temple will treat you to vegetarian noodles today. Please do us the honor." These tourists were all making a fuss because someone was stirring up trouble. At the moment, the troublemaker had been beaten up by Li Yundong and couldn't even speak. Now that Li Yundong was talking to them kindly, they stopped and turned to leave noisily. But someone among the tourists pointed at the man who was being held by Li Yundong and said, "Why don't you let go of him?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I feel like old friends with this friend of mine. I want to talk to him later."
"Why?
"Do you want to have a chat with us?" The man said loudly, "You are holding him hostage, aren't you?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "How can I do that? If you don't believe me, you can ask him yourself." As he said this, he turned his head to look at the young man he was holding and asked, "Did you stay willingly?" How could the young man agree? However, he felt an invisible force pressing down on his head from above. It was as if an invisible hand was pressing down on his head, pressing it down again and again. Seeing that he was nodding desperately, the tourists immediately laughed and scolded, "Damn it! How dare you say you are not gay? What the hell is going on? You were like mortal enemies just now. Why are you so nice now?" Zhou Qin was clever and immediately said to the tourists, "Everyone, please follow me. I'll take you to the restaurant to eat vegetarian noodles." Chinese people loved to take advantage of others. When the tourists saw that there was a chance to take advantage of them, they didn't care about the life or death of this person. They all rushed away, leaving only the two young people looking at each other. They looked at Li Yundong with hatred and turned to leave. However, they did not go to the restaurant but turned around and went down the mountain. Seeing that they had left, Li Yundong turned his head to look at the young man wearing a long cap beside him. He said with a cold face, "Tell me, which sect are you from?" Seeing that all these people had been beaten away by Li Yunyang, and he was the only one left, the man with the cap on his head straightened his neck and shouted, "My father is the leader of the Blue Cave sect. How dare you touch me?" Li Yundong had been cultivating for a long time and had read a lot of cultivation books. He also had a general understanding of the cultivation sects in the world. He pulled the man's hand and walked out of the Taoist temple step by step. He sneered and said, "The Blue Cave sect? It turns out to be the cultivation sect of the Qingyang Palace in Qingqing Mountain, Sichuan. What are the cultivation sects from Sichuan doing in Jiangsu? Why are you making trouble for me? The man also sneered and said, I can come here if I want to. It's none of your business. This mountain doesn't belong to you alone. Li Yundong was a little angry. He exerted force with his fingers, and the man let out a cry. Beads of sweat flowed down his forehead like beans. Li Yundong said in a cold voice, Don't think that I don't dare to touch you. When the 6 great sects besieged the Fox Zen school, I killed 2 people and defeated 9. The souls in my hands are not less than yours. Anyway, killing 2 is killing, and killing 3 is also killing. I dare to offend the 6 great sects and the Jingyi school. Don't think that I don't dare to offend the cultivation sects in Sichuan. The man was sweating profusely. He endured the pain and said in a trembling voice, I heard that you are the strongest master of the younger generation. Even Zi Yuan was defeated by you, so I want to make trouble for you. As long as I win, I will be the strongest master of the younger generation. When Li Yundong heard this, he laughed out loud and said, What do you mean by first and second? Do you have the nerve to call yourself first after winning by such means? The man turned his face away and didn't say anything, but his face was full of disapproval. Obviously, in his opinion, only victory and defeat could be determined in a fight, not in the light of the means. Li Yundong saw that they were on different paths, so he didn't want to waste his breath. He just led the man out of the Taoist temple and warned him with a sneer, Today, for the sake that you didn't make things difficult for others and directly attacked me, I will spare you this time. When you go back, tell the cultivators of the younger generation in the world that if they are not convinced, they can come to challenge me. I, Li Yundong, will never refuse. But if anyone dares to attack the people around me or use any tricks, I will not be polite to him. After that, he waved his hand and threw the man more than 10 meters away. The man with the cap felt like he was flying like a kite, but when he landed, he felt a huge force coming from his body, forcing him to retreat. He could be considered a person who had started cultivating in his mother's womb, so his basic skills were extremely solid. After getting out of Li Yundong's control, he immediately sank his qi into his dantian, trying to control his body. But the force was too strong. If the man took it head-on, his meridians would probably be injured. He had to take more than a dozen steps back and wait for the force to slow down. Only then did he prepare to use qi to stabilize his body. However, just as he was about to use qi, another force suddenly pounced on him. It was like one wave after another, slapping him back again. The man felt helpless and thought to himself, the sneak attack of the leader of the Fox Zen school when he caught me didn't seem to be a coincidence. His hidden strength is really good. He had no choice but to retreat again. But after taking more than a dozen steps back, there was suddenly a fierce force in the force, as if 2 small waves were followed by a real, huge wave. Only then did the man's expression change. Although there were not many cultivators in the world who could divide their strength into 2 and explode it one after another, there were still quite a few of them. But in front of him, there was a huge force hidden behind the 2 forces. This kind of twists and turns couldn't be done without a very authentic, vigorous, and condensed qi. How did this man cultivate? Could it be that he had really cultivated the heavenly Jindan technique, as the rumor said? This time, the man with the cap retreated dozens of steps before he managed to offset the force. After he stopped, his body trembled involuntarily and his feet were soft, as if he was still swaying in the waves just now. Standing on the stairs halfway up the mountain, the man looked up at the Taoist temple where the Fox Zen school was located. His arrogant face finally showed a look of horror. I strongly recommend the modern cultivation film, Chinese Fairy Doctor. Everyone is welcome to come and watch it. Chapter 326. Go to watch net. Just as the man with the cap was in a daze, 2 young people dressed like ordinary people suddenly surrounded him. They were the 2 tourists who had gone straight down the mountain. Go to watch net. 7KOM. The 2 young people approached him and asked with concern, Shirty, are you okay? The man with the cap was pale and his forehead was covered with cold sweat. He said, I'm fine. A person next to him asked, Shirty, Have you found out whether this person has learned the heavenly Jindan technique? The man with the long cap said with lingering fear, I didn't find out. But this man Jinchi is so strong and condensed. Except for my father and the leaders of the great sects, I have never seen such a young man with such pure Jinchi. Even if this person doesn't practice the heavenly Jindan technique, he is also a master. No wonder he can defeat the 6 great sects by himself. I thought it was a false rumor, but now it seems to be true. The other person comforted him. Shirdi, you don't have to be too discouraged. You haven't used the powerful magical weapons and talismans that Master gave you. If you really fight, you won't necessarily lose to him. The man with the cap glared at him and said, I just think that the powerful magical weapon, the Fan of 7 Treasures, is too domineering, so I chose to fight with him. My father refused to pass on the San Huang sword to me. How can I fight with him? With just a few talismans? Humph. Don't say any more. I don't know who spread the news that this guy has the heavenly Jindan technique. I was tempted, so I came here and made such a fool of myself. One of his shitty said, Shirdi, Li Yunyang defeated the 6 great sects by himself and also defeated Jinren Yuyang and Jinren Ziyuan of the Jingyi school. If he hadn't practiced the heavenly Jindan technique, how could he be so powerful? And now the cultivation world is talking about it, and it's spreading like wildfire. The man with the cap spat bitterly and stamped his feet. Fortunately, I was careful. I only said that I was not convinced, and came to challenge him. If he knew that I was aiming for the heavenly Jindan technique, I'm afraid that things would be difficult to settle today. I'm not going to say any more. Damn it, I've lost this place today. I'll find a way to get it back later. Let's go. His other junior brother smiled sinisterly and said, Senior brother, you don't have to be angry. Now that this matter has spread, there will be more and more people coming to find trouble with him in the future. At that time, he will be tired of dealing with them. Senior brother, you can... Before he could finish, the man in the cap also revealed a playful smile, and the 3 of them burst into laughter. Watch net. 7KOM. At this time, in the Taoist temple, after Li Yundong and the others beat up the tourists, he called Chao Yi, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin into his room. Li Yundong asked Chao Yi, did the Fox Zen school have visitors in the past? Chao Yi sighed and said, of course there are. At that time, the Fox Zen school had more than 100 people, including the outer disciples. If we didn't collect some tourist tickets and incense money, we wouldn't have been able to survive at all. However, our Taoist temple doesn't have a lot of incense offerings and very few tourists come here to play. There are a lot of people like today. Li Yundong nodded. After thinking for a while, he said, I've asked the person who came to make trouble just now. He's from the Blue Cave sect. The Blue Cave sect? Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and Chao Yi said in unison. Zhou Qin had never heard of this sect before, so she asked curiously. However, Su Chan and Chao Yi were surprised. Chao Yi frowned and asked, isn't this a cultivation sect from Sichuan? What are they doing here? Do they want to follow the 6 great sects and get involved in this mess? Su Chan snorted and said, then they're too late. The 6 great sects have been defeated by Yundong. Chao Yi shook her head and said, although leader turned the tide and defeated the 6 great sects by himself, this matter must be spreading like wildfire in the cultivation world now. Although the 6 great sects have retreated, there must be many people who are not convinced. It's hard to guarantee that some people will feel aggrieved and come looking for trouble. Li Yunyang nodded and said, yes, that was the son of the leader of the Blue Cave sect. He said that I defeated Ziyuan, and now I have become the top master of the younger generation. He is not convinced, so he came to provoke me. When he defeats me, he will be the top master. As soon as Li Yundong finished speaking, the 3 women in the room sneered disdainfully at the same time. The corners of Zhou Qin's mouth twitched slightly, but she didn't say anything. Su Chan snorted. What's the point of sneaking up on people? There's no glory in winning. Chao Yi sneered and said, is this the so-called decent sect? The descendants of these sect leaders are really getting worse with each generation. Li Yundong sighed softly and said, "If they are coming for me, I have nothing to be afraid of, nor do I have anything to worry about. I have passed the divine tribulation. Why should I be afraid of these villains? What I'm afraid of is that if one plan doesn't work, another plan will come at you, and you won't have any room to protect yourselves. Watch net." Chao Yi said with a face full of shame, "Alas, as an elder of the Fox Sen school, I can't even protect myself. I'm really ashamed of the sect leader." Zhou Qin also looked sad. She bit her lip and frowned, still not saying a word. Only Su Chan took Li Yundong's arm with a smile and said, "Why don't you teach us and make us all great masters? Wouldn't it be better? At that time, you don't need to do anything. If anyone dares to provoke us, we will help you beat them all." "You, old man, can just stay behind and give us instructions." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You're right. Indeed, you have to become stronger. This is the truth. I can protect you for a while, but I can't protect you forever. When we return to Tianan City, I will teach you the heavenly Jindan technique." As soon as he said this, Chao Yi's eyes widened in shock and she said, You really have the heavenly Jindan technique?" Li Yundong was stunned. "How do you know that I have the heavenly Jindan technique?" Only then did Chao Yi come to her senses. She said with a smile, "Last time I saw you fighting with the people of the six sects, your body grew bigger by 3 steps. We discussed in private what kind of cultivation method you were cultivating. We all agreed that you were cultivating the long-lost heavenly Jindan technique. We thought we had guessed wrong, but we didn't expect it to be true." Only then did Li Yundong understand. He laughed and said, "Speaking of which, I also learned it from your Fox Sen school." As he spoke, he told them about the whole process of learning the heavenly Jindan technique. Then he said, "Now that I've passed this set of magic to you, it can be regarded as returning it to the disciples of the mystical silver fox." Chao Yi was stunned. She was stunned for a long time before she shook her head and sighed. Everything in this world is really a cycle of cause and effect. No wonder. Li Yundong nodded to Chao Yi and said, "You don't have to sigh with emotion. You go back first, pack your things, and then take the juniors to Tianan City with me. No one can live here anymore. At present, the Fox Sen School is suffering from internal and external troubles. I can't split myself up. You, Lui Wehong, and Zhuang Yuting, Shibua, don't be separated from each other in the future." He turned his head and looked at Zhou Qin and Su Chan. "In the future, the two of you must stay close to me." Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and Chao Yi said in unison, "Yes." Li Yundong nodded and waved his hand. "Go, pack up quickly, and then we'll go back to Tianan City." The 3 of them responded and left. Not long after, everyone in the Fox Sen school knew that they were leaving the sect. For a moment, their hearts were filled with the sadness of leaving the old place, but they were also full of yearning for a new life. They all chattered and whispered to each other. Li Yundong took the lead and went down the mountain. Su Chan and Zhou Qin didn't have any luggage, so they accompanied Li Yundong empty-handed. Chao Yi, Lui Wehong, and Zhuang Yuting, the only remaining seniors of the Fox Zen school, followed Li Yundong down the mountain, looking back reluctantly. Some of the little foxes were crying secretly, choking with sobs. Su Chan felt very sad when she heard this. When she followed Li Yundong to the foot of the mountain, she pulled his arm, looked back at the towering mountain, and asked, "Yundong, do we have to leave? Can we come back again?" Li Yundong also looked back at Mount Tianlong and said in a low voice, "A great man once said that if you keep the land but lose the people, you will lose both the people and the land. If you keep the people and lose the land, you will gain both.
Right now, we are too weak to defend this mountain.
If we insist on staying, we will only give the enemy a chance to attack us one by one. When we become stronger, we will come back, and we will come back openly." The little fox nodded vigorously. "Yes, I will also become stronger." Zhou Qin glanced at Li Yundong from the side and secretly remembered Li Yundong's vow in her heart. She thought to herself, "Master, I will help you realize it." Li Yundong, and his group of more than 10 people took the train from Dongbu City to Tiannan City. There were more than a dozen women in this group, all of whom were stunning beauties. Li Yundong was the only man. He was really a little green in a sea of red, surrounded by a group of beautiful women. The male passengers on the road were so envious that their eyes turned red. The appearance of so many beautiful women at the same time was naturally extremely eye-catching. Along the way, there were countless men who came to talk to her. Only Zhou Qin's face was as cold as frost. Few men dared to come forward to talk to her. Chao Yi and the other leaders of the Fox Zen school also respected their identities and looked straight ahead. Few people came to talk to her. However, the little foxes, led by Su Chan, were all naive and lively. They couldn't keep a straight face even if they wanted to, so they were naturally harassed to the point of being miserable. After finally getting off the train, the group of little foxes rushed out of the train as soon as possible, like prisoners who had been released. They looked around excitedly, while whispering to each other about what their new home would look like. At this time, Su Chan seemed to be respected by the little foxes as their leader. She put her hands on her hips and proudly introduced the process of her and Li Yundong's visit to their new home. But when she said that her room was spacious and bright and could accommodate many people, the little girl suddenly noticed a problem. Her and Li Yundong's home had 3 rooms and 2 living rooms, which was indeed spacious, but there were more than a dozen people here. Even if Zhou Qin had a place to live, how could she arrange for more than a dozen people from the Fox Zen school? For a moment, the little girl couldn't help but stare blankly. She quickly got rid of the little foxes and ran to Li Yundong. She pulled him aside and said nervously, "Yundong, our house is only so big. How can we live with so many people?" Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I'm also worried about this problem. I originally wanted to find another place for them to live, but I couldn't find one in a short time. I had to let them squeeze in at home for a night or 2. Besides, we are all cultivators. It's no big deal to sleep on the floor for a night or 2. Su Chan thought for a moment and suddenly had an idea. She said with a cheeky smile, "Then I want to sleep with you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Aren't you afraid that your fellow disciples will laugh at you?" Su Chan raised her head and made a face. "I'm not afraid. My master is the leader of the sect. How dare they laugh at me? I'll make things difficult for them." Li Yundong laughed and tapped the little girl's nose. "Look at you. This is how the unspoken rules of the world come about." He scolded with a smile. While the 2 of them were talking and laughing, they suddenly heard a noise coming from not far away. They turned their heads and saw several male travelers dragging their suitcases. They tilted their heads and looked at the beautiful women of the Fox Zen school. For a moment, they were thrown off their feet. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he secretly felt a headache coming on. He thought to himself, "Su Chan, this little fox spirit, has made such a mess when she came into the world." Last time, the group of foxes of the Fox Zen school went down the mountain and almost blocked the streets of Tiannan City. This time, she has come into the world legitimately. I'm afraid that the world will not be peaceful from now on. What can I do? Chapter 327. Go to Watch Network. Although Li Yundong was a very low-key person, with so many beautiful women accompanying him along the way, he couldn't keep a low profile even if he wanted to. Along the way, he almost returned to Hongsheng New Area under all kinds of amazed and jealous gazes. Go to the Watch Network. A group of little foxes chattering on the street didn't seem noisy, but once they entered the quiet community, especially after entering the building, they immediately became like a flock of ducks, which made Li Yundong's head hurt. In particular, when a group of people got into the elevator was crowded. Half of the people who were about to get on the elevator looked at the elevator on the left and right side of the door and were shocked. They saw Li Yundong standing at the front of the elevator, and behind him stood a group of beautiful women. They all looked different, but all of them were stunning beauties. These people were shocked. The men felt ashamed of their inferiority and almost turned around and jumped off the building. The women almost stabbed their eyes out, only to hate their parents for not giving them good looks. Although Li Yundong made room for them when he saw them, they were not willing to get on the elevator. They just shook their heads like a rattledrum, watched the elevator close, and watched Li Yundong go upstairs with a large group of beautiful women. When the elevator closed, they each activated their extraordinary imaginations and began to let their imaginations run wild about the background of this boy who is surrounded by a group of beautiful women. Li Yundong felt strange under these gazes. When he finally reached the floor, he walked out of the elevator and coughed dryly. "We're here." These little foxes immediately rushed out of the elevator like a tide and cheered, "Hooray!" They were all young and beautiful, and their voices were crisp and loud. In this corridor, it was like a shout, immediately attracting the surrounding neighbors to open their doors and poke their heads out. A man poked his head out to take a look and was immediately shocked to the point of drooling. He was about to go out and deliberately try to get close to them, but soon the hostess rushed over and pulled him back by the ear. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at the lively little foxes, shouting, "Be quiet." Chao Yi also said to the juniors, "Don't quarrel. Don't embarrass the leader." Li Yundong nodded to Chao Yi and said, "I have something to say later. Don't make trouble." After saying that, he opened the door himself. After pushing the door open, Li Yundong felt a familiar scent. Before he could enter the room, the little fox, Su Chan, let out a cheer and rushed in, rolling on the sand. With her taking the lead, the little foxes behind Li Yundong suddenly became restless. Watch net. 7th KOM. Li Yundong realized that something was wrong, so he coughed dryly and glared at Su Chan. Seeing Li Yundong glaring at her, the little girl blinked in confusion at first, but she soon saw the fellow disciples behind Li Yundong, who were also staring at her. She immediately came to her senses and got up from the sand obediently. She lowered her head, rubbed the corner of her clothes with her fingers, and walked step by step to Li Yundong. She pouted and said pitifully, "Leader, I was too presumptuous. Please punish me." Li Yundong glared at her and said, "Your punishment is to sleep in the living room tonight."
Ah!
Su Chan raised her head and looked at him eagerly. But when she saw the determined look on his face, she could only say, "Oh," and lowered her head with a look of disappointment. Li Yundong didn't seem to see her expression. With a straight face, he said to the disciples of the Fox Zen school behind him, "Come in, everyone." Seeing that Su Chan had been reprimanded, the little foxes immediately became much more obedient. One by one, they entered the door, and the originally spacious living room suddenly became crowded. Li Yundong saw that everyone in the Fox Zen school, whether it was the seniors like Chao Yi or the juniors like Su Chan, were all very nervous. He smiled slightly and said, "Don't be so nervous. It's as if you've entered a black shop." As soon as Li Yundong said this, everyone immediately laughed, and the tense atmosphere dissipated a lot. Li Yundong dragged over a few chairs in the dining room and said, "Sit down, all of you. Su Chan, Zhou Qin, you, and the other Shiji can sit on the sofa or the carpet. Chao Yi, you three Sherbua, come and sit on the chairs in the dining room." Chao Yi smiled and said, "Leader, you don't have to be so polite. We can sit with the juniors." Li Yundong pressed Chao Yi and the others into the chairs and said, "No, there is a difference between the old and the young. This must be clearly distinguished." After the group of people sat down, Li Yundong saw that everyone was looking at him eagerly. He said, "Ever since I took over as the leader of the Fox Zen school, our school has been restless and unstable. I will first reflect on myself. I am not good at being the leader. I am not qualified." As he spoke, he stood up and bowed to the people of the Fox Zen school in apology. Watch net. 7th KOM. Chao Yi and the other Sherbas said one after another, "Leader, you are too serious. Leader, it's not your fault. Leader, if it weren't for you, our Fox Zen school would have been destroyed." Some of the juniors of the Fox Zen school also said, "Leader, you are very kind to us. We know that the former leader didn't even let us go down the mountain. Not only did you let us go down the mountain, but you also gave us food and accommodation. You are so kind to us. At this time, the other little foxes also echoed, yes, yes, you also bought us beautiful clothes to wear. Leader, you are so kind to us. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, oh my, they are all a group of naive little girls who don't know anything about the world. If you meet other men, they will not only give you food and accommodation, but also a place to sleep. Li Yundong coughed dryly and said, okay, don't say any more. Now that I have taken you down the mountain, I will be responsible for your food, clothing, housing, and transportation. In a few days, I will find a house for you. For the next 2 days, you will have to bear with it and squeeze in a room. He said to the 3 sherbas of the Fox Zen School, Chao Yi, Lui Wehong, and Zhuang Yiting, you 3 sherbas can sleep in Su Chan's room. Her room is the most spacious. How about you 3 sherbas share a room? Chao Yi, Lui Wehong, and Zhuang Yiting all smiled and said, it doesn't matter. We will listen to leader's instructions. Li Yundong then said to the remaining 7 juniors of the Fox Zen School, 4 of you will sleep in the other 2 bedrooms.
How about that?
The little foxes of the Fox Zen School nodded one after another and said crisply, we will listen to leaders. Although Li Yundong didn't have any improper thoughts about these beautiful little foxes, he was really happy to hear so many stunning beauties say this together. Li Yundong nodded and then said to Su Chan and Zhou Qin, the 3 of us will sleep outside the living room. Hearing this, Su Chan couldn't help but let out a cry of disappointment. However, Zhou Qin's heart skipped a beat. She knew that Li Yundong was showing the people of the Fox Zen School that he, Su Chan, and himself were innocent. Zhou Qin's expression didn't change and she didn't say anything, but Chao Yi and the others of the Fox Zen School immediately stood up and shook their heads. No, absolutely not. Li Yundong asked in confusion, why? Chao Yi said with a serious face, how can we let the leader of a sect sleep in the living room while we sleep in the bedroom? Although our Fox Zen School is a small sect, we also understand that there are other principles of seniority. The leader is a precious person. How can he sleep in the living room? No, absolutely not. Lui Wehong also nodded in agreement and said, 6 shimmy is right. If you sleep in the living room, we would rather not sleep. Zhuang Yiting also said, that's right. Seeing that the 3 sherbwa had agreed, the juniors of the Fox Zen School immediately followed suit and said, that's right. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, then what should we do? Chao Yi said, the leader should have a room by himself, and then the 3 of us will share a room. Su Chan and Zhou Qin will share a room, and the juniors of the Fox Zen School will squeeze in the living room. That's good. Li Yundong shook his head and said, how can this work? How can 7 people squeeze in the living room? However, Chao Yi said flatly, we cultivators don't have high requirements for a place to sleep. We just need to sit cross-legged and meditate for a night. The living room is very spacious and enough for 7 people. Previously, the leader also said that there is a difference between the elders and the juniors, so I think the leader should also know the difference. Only in this way can we distinguish the difference between the elders and the juniors. Li Yundong still shook his head. No, this won't work. Everyone is squeezing. How can I sleep in a room alone? Su Chan looked at Li Yundong eagerly, wishing that he could say, I'm sharing a room with this girl. But she also knew that it was possible for Li Yundong to say this in private, but in front of so many people of the Fox Zen School, he would never say it out loud. While she was thinking about it, Chao Yi said, leader, if you don't agree, then we don't dare to live in the room. Otherwise, even if we meditate, we won't be at ease. The others of the Fox Zen School also said in unison, yes, leader. Seeing that they had joined hands, Li Yundong's face was full of helplessness. He could only sigh and say, well, let's do as you say. I'll go find a house tomorrow. Please make do for the night. The people of the Fox Zen School laughed. It's okay. Li Yundong also smiled helplessly and said, well, I've said what I should. But if you want to go out, you must go out together. Don't be alone, and you must tell me. The people of the Fox Sen school nodded in agreement. Seeing that Li Yundong had finished speaking, Su Chan immediately jumped up and rushed over to him. She said eagerly, "Yundong, does that mean I can't go to your room?" Li Yundong was not very willing to be intimate with the little girl in front of the disciples of the Fox Sen school. He deliberately said with a straight face, "What are you talking about? As long as it's not sleeping time, you can go at any time." Su Chan pouted and was unhappy. She thought to herself, "I just want to go at sleeping time. You obviously know that, but you said that. You're so annoying." But she was clever. Her eyes rolled, and she immediately thought of a way. Why not use a doppelganger skill and hide her real body in Li Yundong's room and put her fake body in her own room? As soon as this idea came to mind, Su Chan immediately became proud and thought, "Girl, you are the smartest. These days, my cultivation hasn't made any progress with Master, but my fighting skills have improved by leaps and bounds." Thinking of this, Su Chan's face immediately brightened up. She said with a smile, "Then I'll go to your room and see if you're hiding a woman." Li Yundong scolded with a smile, "What kind of woman are you hiding? With women like you, do I need to hide anything else? I can't even handle you." Li Yundong's words were very ambiguous. The juniors of the Fox Sen school all turned their faces away and giggled. Seeing their strange expressions, Li Yundong came to his senses. He felt that something was wrong, so he coughed dryly and didn't say anything else. Su Chan ran to Li Yundong's door with a cheeky smile. Holding the door handle with one hand, she turned around and said to Li Yundong with a smile, "I'm opening the door." Li Yundong glared at her angrily and waved his hand. "Open it." Su Chan twisted the doorknob and pulled it open. As soon as she pulled it open, countless small plastic bags poured out like a tidal wave, instantly drowning Su Chan in it. Li Yundong was shocked. He immediately rushed over and shouted, "Girl, are you okay?" Chapter 328. Go to watch net. Su Chan let out a cry as she was washed away by the tide of plastic bags, but she quickly struggled to stand up. Her 165-meter-tall body was only left with half of her body submerged by the small plastic bags that suddenly gushed out of the room. She stared at the plastic bags under her in shock, then picked one up and saw a few words written on it. Fujian Taiguanin. At this time, Li Yundong also found that his room was full of tea bags. He was stunned and said, "What's going on? Why are there so many tea leaves?" Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly heard the sound of keys at the door. Then the door was pushed open, and Wan Hongling and Ziyuan walked in with big bags. Go to watch net. The two female disciples of the Linggong sect were shocked to see so many people in the room, especially the female disciples of the Fox Sen school. Wan Hongling's eyes widened, and she said in shock, "What's going on?" Then she saw Li Yundong and Su Chan, who was drowned in Taiguanin tea, and suddenly burst out laughing. When Ziyuan saw Li Yundong and Su Chan standing in the sea of Taiguanin tea, she couldn't help but smile. Wan Hongling said to Li Yundong, "Hey, who told you to open the door? Don't you know how much effort should Ji and I put into piling up these tea leaves?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are they all piled up in my rooms?" Wan Hongling laughed and said, "You still have the nerve to say that. You let us two girls come back to do these things, while you are leisurely in Dongbu City. We worked hard to move so many tea leaves from the first floor up, but you are still picky. Let me tell you." Wan Hongling wanted to say more, but Ziyuan glared at her and shouted, "Hongling, don't be presumptuous in front of the leader of the Fox Sen school." The implication of Ziyuan's words was very obvious. She was reminding Wan Hongling that Li Yundong was not someone she could yell at casually.
He was the leader of a sect.
Only then did Wan Hongling react. She snorted with a resentful face and swallowed the rest of her words. Chao Yi was quick-witted and quickly reacted. She stepped forward, bowed to Ziyuan and Wan Hongling, and said, "Amateus, sorry to disturb Jinren Ziyuan and Jinren Hongling." Ziyuan smiled faintly and returned the greeting. "You're welcome. How can I disturb you?" When the others of the Fox Sen school saw Ziyuan and Wan Hongling come in, although they did not take the initiative to come forward to show their goodwill like Chao Yi, most of them stood up one after another, maintaining a vigilant and distant attitude. Ziyuan also knew that although she had participated in the siege of the Fox Sen school last time and had secretly helped the Fox Sen school, she could be regarded as the benefactor of the Fox Sen school. Watch Net. 7th KOM. However, the grudge between the Fox Sen school and the Jingyi school was too deep. Moreover, Yan Fong was the second Shibua of the Linggong sect and had a very close relationship with him. Yan Fong had almost caused the destruction of the Fox Sen school. It would be a lie to say that there was no resentment in the hearts of the Fox Sen school. Ziyuan was well aware of this, so she didn't care about it. She just smiled gently at them and then said to Li Yundong, "Jinren Li, can I have a word with you in private?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay, let me put all these tea leaves back first." After that, he controlled his jinqi and swept all the tea bags back into the room like sweeping the floor. Then he used his jinqi to block them so that none of them fell out. Su Chan, who was beside him, quickly took the opportunity to close the door with a bang. She patted her chest and said with lingering fear, "I was scared just now. Did Zheng Yiming bring all these tea leaves here?" Li Yundong spread his hands. "Is there someone else?" Su Chan rolled her eyes. "Then where will you sleep at night?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "I'll sleep in the living room with you." At this time, Ziyuan said, "Jinren Li, if you don't mind, you can stay at our place for the night." Li Yundong hesitated for a moment. "That's not good, is it?" Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "It's okay, but I have 2 questions to ask you." Li Yundong nodded and went to Su Chan's bedroom with Ziyuan. After closing the door, he asked, "Do you want to ask me why I brought all the disciples of the Fox Sen school home?" Ziyuan saw that Li Yundong was getting straight to the point. She thought that Li Yundong would avoid this question, so she couldn't help but be stunned. Seeing her expression, Li Yundong laughed and said, "I know that you will think too much when you see this scene. Yes, the people of the Fox Sen school are all intelligent foxes, and all of them are stunning beauties. Normally, it would be enough to cause a great uproar if one of them came to the human world, let alone so many of them. So, you have doubts in your heart about whether I have selfish motives or not, right?" Ziyuan also laughed and said, "Amateus, Jinren Li, you are so frank. It seems that I was overthinking." Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "If I were you, I would also think too much. However, I really have my own difficulties in bringing them down the mountain. Even if you didn't tell me, I would have told you. Go to the internet." 7 KOM. Ziyuan asked curiously, "Oh, what's so difficult about the famous Jinren Li?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "Don't tease me. There's no one else here. Given our friendship, there's no need to be so polite." As he said this, he told Ziyuan what had happened to him before, and then said, "Such a tragedy has occurred in our Fox Sen school, and even a mortal has been implicated. This matter is really a thorn in my heart, making me restless." Ziyuan said with a serious face, "Do you suspect that there is a traitor in your Fox Sen school?"
Li Yundong said, "Yes."
Now the Fox Sen school is suffering from internal and external troubles, and the situation is extremely bad. Not only has its economic lifeline been cut off, but the food, clothing, housing, and transportation of a group of people have also become a problem. Moreover, the major sects are still not giving up on the Fox Sen school. Yesterday, I found a gangster peeking at the heavenly Jindan technique in the secret room of the Fox Sen school. I think if the news that the heavenly Jindan technique is in the hands of the Fox Sen school gets out, our Fox Sen school will not have a good life. Now, I don't know how many enemies are coveting us outside, and I don't know if there is a traitor inside. If there is, who is it? So I brought them all down the mountain. Everyone is together, so it's convenient for us to monitor each other." Ziyuan nodded slightly, and there was a look of admiration in her eyes. She said, "Do the other people of the Fox Sen school know that there is a traitor in the sect?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, No, I only told Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and you about this. I think if they know, they might suspect each other. At that time, the hearts of the whole sect will be scattered. At that time, I will be the leader of the sect in name only. Zi Yuan sighed softly and looked at Li Yundong sympathetically. It's really not easy for you to be the leader of the sect. Li Yundong chuckled and said, I received orders in the face of danger. Moreover, for the sake of Su Chan, I have to persist. I can't let her sect be destroyed in my hands. Zi Yuan's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes and sighed. You are really a man of affection and righteousness. Li Yundong waved his hand and said, I think I may cause you a lot of trouble in the future. After all, there are 11 people in the Fox Sen school, including Su Chan. Sometimes, I can't look after them alone. I have to find a house for them tomorrow, and we have to find a store as soon as possible and open it. Otherwise, if we just sit here and eat, it won't be long before there are only 80 yuan left of the 800,000 yuan. Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, You're right. We really have to increase our income and reduce our expenditure. Otherwise, if a group of cultivators die of poverty and starvation, it will really be the biggest joke in the cultivation world in the past 5,000 years. Li Yundong chuckled and said, But at night, I want to ask you for a favor. Zi Yuan asked in confusion. What kind of favor? Li Yundong said, I want to see if the bodies of the 2 golden snakes are still there. Zi Yuan asked curiously, Why do you want to see them? Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, I'll tell you the reason tonight. I can't answer until I've seen them. Zi Yuan smiled and changed the topic. Well, since we've made things clear, we should face a bigger problem now. Li Yundong asked, What's the problem? Zi Yuan pointed outside the door and said, There are so many people. How are we going to feed them? Are we going out to eat or eating at home? Li Yundong couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. There are so many people. If we go out to eat, I'm afraid it will be too noisy. We'd better eat at home. Zi Yuan began to roll up her sleeves and said with a smile, Then we should get started now. It won't take a while to prepare a meal for more than a dozen people. Li Yundong laughed and said, Fortunately, you're here. Otherwise, I'm afraid that my waist would break if I were to do it alone. Zi Yuan said, Li Yundong, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you have to find a way to get out of these mundane things. Otherwise, you won't even have time to practice, and your cultivation will not progress at all. You have to know that cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't make progress, you will fall back. If you don't make progress, maybe someone will defeat you next time. Li Yundong thought of the young man from the Blue Cave sect who had come to provoke him. He couldn't help but look serious. He said, You're right. When I solve the problem of food and clothing for the Fox Sen school, I can free up my hands to cultivate. Zi Yuan nodded and didn't say anything. After the 2 of them went out, they went into the kitchen and began to get busy. Wan Hongling went in to help, but Su Chan was still forbidden from leaving the kitchen by Li Yundong, so she had to watch TV in the living room obediently. The little foxes surrounded the TV curiously and kept chattering. But after watching for a while, they got tired of it. More people surrounded Su Chan curiously and asked her to tell them about all kinds of things she had encountered in the secular world. The little girl was crazy when she saw a group of people surrounding her. She also became interested and talked about her coming to the secular world. But after she came to the secular world, she had never left Li Yundong's side. Naturally, she talked about him between the lines, especially when she said that she had smashed the TV with a punch and made Li Yundong owe a lot of money. The 2 of them had huddled in a small room and depended on each other. Her face showed a happy and sweet smile. It would have been better if she hadn't said it. As soon as she said it, a little fox suddenly understood and said, Oh, it turns out that the leader will only like you if you make him in debts. The other little foxes nodded in unison, and then their eyes rolled around. They couldn't help but think of something to destroy so that the leader would remember them. But after looking left and right, their eyes finally fell on the TV, and they were all ready to make a move. Su-chan was shocked and hurriedly stood in front of the plasma TV like an old hen protecting her chicks. She said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" Immediately, the little fox of the Fox Zen school said sourly, "Only you can cause trouble, but we can't do something to make the leader remember us." Su-chan was so depressed that she was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. She said loudly, "Yundong works very hard to make money. Shouldn't we help him? If you cause trouble at this time, you will only make him angry and hate you." Her appearance made Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, chuckle. However, she felt that she was not a member of the Fox Zen school, so it was not appropriate for her to speak. She just watched the fun from the side. Su-chan's words made the little foxes hesitate again. Chao Yi also scolded, "Scoundrel! What nonsense are you making? Aren't you afraid that the leader will drive you back?" It had not been easy for these little foxes to go down the mountain. After seeing this kind of colorful world, how could they be willing to go back? They immediately shook their heads like a rattledrum. Only then did they give up the idea and give up one by one. Su-chan patted her chest with lingering fear. "Thank goodness. Those lawless bastards almost tore this house apart," she said, patting her chest with lingering fear. "No, these guys are so naughty. I have to help Yundong, keep an eye on them." At this time, Li Yundong walked out of the kitchen with a plate of food. It was a plate of golden braised meatballs. He shouted, "Kids, get ready to eat." His cooking skills were excellent, and the food he made looked, smelled, and tasted good. With Ziyuan's help in the kitchen, the two chefs worked together, so the food they made was naturally not ordinary. For a moment, all the people of the Fox Zen school in the room stared at the plate in Li Yunyang's hand with their eyes wide open. As elders, Chao Yi and the others could still bear it, but they thought to themselves, how can the leader be so good at cooking? The food he makes is really fragrant and makes people drool. It seems that we will have good food in the future. If they were like this, the little foxes were even more unbearable. They watched Li Yundong put the plate on the table and suddenly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. At first, they could barely hold on, but when Li Yundong turned around and entered the kitchen, they suddenly shouted and rushed to the table like robbers. They didn't even need chopsticks and reached out to grab the food. Su-chan was dumbfounded. It took her a long time to react. She stomped her feet and said angrily, "Bastard, it's my specialty to steal food." After that, she pounced on him with bared fangs and brandished claws, joining the fight. Chapter 329. Go to WatchNet. When Li Yundong came out with another dish, he was shocked to find that the braised meatball in brown sauce he had brought out before was gone. All that was left was a dish with a dim soup, lying alone on the table, looking very miserable. "Go to WatchNet." Li Yundong said in shock. "Did I offend a robber? What's going on?" As soon as Su-chan saw Li Yundong, she immediately turned around. Her mouth was pouting, and her face was full of grievance. Tears kept welling up in her eyes. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong thought that she had been bullied. He was shocked again and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Su-chan sobbed and said in a choked voice, "Yundong, I didn't get any just now." As soon as her voice fell, Li Yundong burst out laughing. As he laughed, the others in the room also laughed. The more aggrieved the girl was, the angrier she became. She was so angry that she hit Li Yundong with her fist. She stamped her feet and said angrily, "You're so annoying. How dare you laugh at me?" Li Yundong quickly turned back to cover the dish and said with a smile, "Hey, be careful. If you spill it, you won't have anything to eat." Only then did Su-chan notice that there was a braised bream on the plate in Li Yundong's hand. She immediately drooled and said eagerly, "This time, I want to take the first bite." Li Yundong looked up and saw that the disciples of the Fox Zen school, big and small, were all craning their necks to look at him. They were all staring at the plate in his hand with green eyes. He thought to himself, "Oh my, this is simply a group of hungry ghosts who haven't eaten for thousands of years. I'm afraid that this dish will be eaten immediately after I put it on the table." Li Yundong hurriedly took the dish and walked into the kitchen. Seeing that he had actually turned around and left, Suchan immediately shouted, "Hey, where are you going? I want to take the first bite." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "This fish will be gone in one bite. When the dishes are all ready, I'll bring them up together. Otherwise, if I bring one up, you guys will eat one at a time." After that, he slammed the kitchen door shut. Suchan was depressed. She rushed to the door and pounded on it with her fists, shouting, "Yundong, I'm starving. Let me eat something first." She knocked on the door for a while, and it suddenly opened. Before the little girl could close her mouth, Li Yundong stuffed something into her mouth and closed the door with a crash. Something was stuffed into the little girl's mouth. At first, she thought that Li Yundong had given her a piece of delicious food, but when she bit it, she found that it was extremely hard. Not only could she not bite it, but it almost broke her teeth. Watch net. Suchan lowered her head and spat out the thing in her mouth. It turned out to be a walnut, and it was an uncracked walnut. Suchan immediately stomped her feet and said, "Wow, you actually hit me with a hard walnut. I don't care, I want to eat." At this time, Li Yundong opened the door again and asked with a serious face, "One is not enough? Those two?" As he spoke, he handed over another walnut. Suchan was so angry that she grabbed the walnut and walked to the living room angrily. She sat alone on the sofa and sulked. Li Yundong laughed and closed the door. In the living room, everyone from the Fox Zen school covered their mouths and snickered. When Chao Yi saw the little girl peeling walnuts in anger, she held back her laughter and walked over to Suchan. She handed her a braised pork head in brown sauce and said, "Choner, I have another one here. Why don't you eat it first?" Suchan turned her head and saw that the braised pork head in brown sauce had already been bitten. How could she eat it now? She became more and more depressed in her heart and said angrily, "No, I don't want to eat anymore." At this time, everyone from the Fox Zen school burst out laughing. Some little foxes took pleasure in Suchan's misfortune and whispered sarcastically, "That's good. There's one less person to fight for food.
We can eat more."
When Suchan heard this, she immediately beat her chest and stamped her feet in her heart, regretting it. She thought to herself, "Idiot, why are you being angry with yourself? If you don't eat, won't you starve?" However, she had just said those words out of anger. She was thin-skinned and couldn't take them back for a while. She just rolled her eyes and thought about what excuse to find to eat later. About half an hour later, the kitchen door suddenly opened. Li Yundong, Ziyuan, and Wan Hongling all came out with 2 plates in their hands. They went in and out a few times and brought out more than a dozen dishes. For a moment, the table was full. Wan Hongling looked at the dishes on the table and felt proud of herself. She shook her head and said, "Fortunately, I'm wise and powerful. I've long anticipated this situation and bought so many dishes. Otherwise, everyone would just be waiting to eat the northwest wind." Ziyuan laughed and scolded, "Would you die if you didn't show off?" Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "Kids." The juniors of the Fox Zen school all smiled and answered crisply yes. Li Yundong hadn't expected them to be so funny. He immediately laughed and said, "Get ready to eat." The little foxes had been waiting for him to say this for a long time. Suddenly, their eyes turned green, and they rolled up their sleeves, ready to rush forward. Go to the net. 7KOM. Li Yundong was shocked when he saw them like this, as if they were about to break through the enemy lines. He quickly shouted, "Stop." Just one shout from him was enough to stop the experts of the various sects from moving, let alone these little foxes. When the little foxes heard Li Yundong shout, they all froze and looked at him in confusion. It seemed that they didn't understand why they were not allowed to eat when all the dishes had been served. Li Yundong said with a straight face, "You guys are swarming up like a swarm of bees and robbing. What's wrong with that? Little ones, listen up. Go find your own chairs and sit in an orderly manner." The little foxes of the Fox Zen school replied with a smile, "Yes." Then they all ran to other rooms to find something to sit on. Someone shouted, Leader, there are no chairs left. What should we do? Li Yundong also said loudly. Then stand. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, suddenly teased with a smile. Master, why do I feel like you are the Golden Horn King in the journey to the west? An old monster with a group of little monsters under his command? As soon as she said this, Chao Yi and the others from the Fox Zen school looked at her and smiled without saying anything. Li Yundong smiled indifferently and said, No, I am clearly the ruler of the country of women. It's just that the one in the journey to the west is a female ruler, and I am a male ruler. Only then did everyone notice that there were more than a dozen people in the room, but Li Yundong was the only man. The others were all stunning beauties. Wan Hongling scolded with a smile. You must have been a bachelor for 9 lifetimes to have such a good luck with women. TSK, there are so many beautiful women in this room, but you are the only man. If God finds out about your luck with women, I'm afraid you will be struck by lightning. Zi Yuan shouted, Hongling, don't talk nonsense. Li Yundong chuckled and said, It's okay. He waved his hand and motioned for everyone to sit down. He was the leader of the sect, so he was elected to sit at the head of the table. Chao Yi and the other elders of the Fox Zen school sat on his left. As the future leader of the Linggong sect, Zi Yuan was Li Yundong's teacher and friend, so she naturally sat on the right side, and Wan Hongling sat next to her. Li Yundong was about to assign other people seats when Su Chan suddenly walked over slowly. He suddenly laughed and asked curiously, Hey, didn't you say you didn't want to eat? Su Chan had originally hoped that no one would remember this matter, so she could fish in troubled waters and come over to eat. Who would have thought that when everyone saw her coming over, they would tacitly understand and not say anything? However, Li Yundong had brought up this matter. He really touched a sore spot. Su Chan stamped her feet and said angrily, I asked you for food just now, but you pretended not to hear me. Why did you hear this? Li Yundong wanted to tease her, so he chuckled and said, I didn't hear a lot of things just now, but I did. Didn't you say you didn't want to eat? Why are you going back on your word? Su Chan snorted, as if she had been prepared for this. She said proudly, Humph, I only said that I didn't want to eat, but I didn't say that I didn't want to eat vegetables. As soon as she said this, everyone laughed. Li Yundong tapped Su Chan's nose and scolded her with a smile. Sly girl. Well, you pass. Sit next to Chao Yi and eat. As he said this, he turned to Zhou Qin and said, Zhou Qin, you sit next to Su Chan, the others could sit at will. There were more than a dozen people at the table, and for a moment, the table was full. Everyone looked at the dishes on the table eagerly, and then looked at Li Yundong eagerly. Their chopsticks were hanging in the air, waiting for Li Yundong's order to go forward and start eating. Li Yundong saw that Zhou Qin, who was usually the most shrewd and had the strongest willpower, couldn't stop swallowing. It was obvious that she was very hungry. He didn't wait any longer and said with a smile, Well, let's start. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd cheered and pounced on him. Li Yundong saw that for a moment, the dishes and chopsticks were flying on the table, and their arms were the same color as the tablecloth. He suddenly took a deep breath and thought, Oh my God, this is not starting to eat. This is clearly a war. Do these guys think they're fighting? Li Yundong saw Su Chan snatch a bowl of dishes and wolf down her food. He couldn't help but stand up, stretch out his chopsticks to knock Su Chan's bowl, and shouted, Hey, you're a cultivator. Eat slowly. Su Chan replied with an oh, but her speed was not slow at all. Li Yundong was so angry that he knocked on her bowl again and shouted, Hey, if you eat so fast, I'll take your bowl away. Su Chan quickly turned around and covered the bowl with her body. She muttered vaguely, Zhou Qin is also eating so fast. She is your disciple. Why don't you scold her? Li Yundong turned his head and saw that Zhou Qin's bowl was also full. She had completely lost her usual ladylike image. Li Yundong stared at her and said, Hey, don't you pay attention to your image? Zhou Qin smiled dryly and said, Master, I'm an ordinary person, not like you cultivators. If I don't eat my fill, I won't have any strength. As she spoke, she stuffed 2 more pieces of duck meat into her mouth. Li Yundong was depressed. He turned to look at Ziyuan, ready to ask for reinforcements. He said, Ziyuan, look, why don't you say something? You. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly saw Ziyuan. Seeing that the crowd was really fierce, she frowned and simply dragged the 2 vegetarian dishes in front of her. Fortunately, the people of the Fox Zen School were a group of hungry ghosts who had never eaten meat before. They were all focused on grabbing the meat dishes. No one noticed that Ziyuan had dragged 2 plates of vegetarian dishes away by herself. But they didn't notice that Li Yundong was stunned. He said, Ziyuan, you're not joining in the fun, are you? Ziyuan looked at him helplessly and said, cultivators also have to eat. As she spoke, she didn't stop. Although she was still eating in a gentle manner, she was not eating slowly. Li Yundong saw that the 2 dishes in front of her were quickly eaten up by her and Wan Hongling. Li Yundong saw that the group of hungry ghosts had almost thrown themselves on the table, and he couldn't even see the dishes. He stared blankly, took a deep breath, and said, Oh my God, you're not eating, but fighting. Well, since you're not polite, I won't be polite either. Look at my sweeping away the clouds. He shouted loudly, and the chopsticks in his hand clanged twice, making 2 crisp sounds. When everyone heard his shout, they raised their heads one after another. Li Yundong was just about to put down his chopsticks when he saw that after everyone stood up, the table was revealed. All the dishes on the table had been swept away. It was empty, and there were no dishes left. Li Yundong was dumbfounded and said, You actually snatched up all the dishes in less than a minute. Everyone looked at each other and laughed dryly. Su Chan stuck out her tongue, took a soup bowl over, and said, Yundong, there's still some soup here. Li Yundong took the soup bowl and saw that there was only clear soup in it. There wasn't even any green onion in it. He couldn't help but say frantically, Damn it, you are really a group of female bandits. You didn't leave anything for me, and you even said that the elders should respect me. I'm the one who cooked this meal. You didn't leave anything for me. Chao Yi smiled apologetically and said, Leader, I still have braised pork head here. Do you want it? Li Yundong said angrily, Give it to me. It's better than nothing. But when he took a look, he found that the braised pork head had been bitten off. How could he eat it? Li Yundong was so angry that he couldn't help but feel dizzy. Suddenly, he heard Wan Hongling say loudly, By the way, they're still. Li Yundong couldn't help but be overjoyed. What else is there in the kitchen? Wan Hongling said slowly, There are 2 pots of rice in the kitchen. Li Yundong, you can eat this braised pork head and then eat 2 pots of rice. After that, the women burst into laughter. Li Yundong burst into tears. F***CK, this is not a romantic encounter. This is clearly suffering. Chapter 330. Go to WatchNet. As the leader and chief chef, Li Yundong couldn't even eat a bite of the food he made. He felt that his days were really dark. Go to WatchNet. After eating a bowl of rice, Li Yundong, who was very depressed, began to rearrange the accommodation of a group of people. After some discussion, Ziyuan took the initiative to say, Why don't the disciples of the Fox Zen School and I rest in the living room? You can stay in my room, and Wan Hongling can stay in her own room. The others will stay the same. What do you think? Li Yundong pondered for a moment and hesitated. Unexpectedly, when Su Chan heard that Li Yundong could stay in a room alone, she immediately smiled and said, Okay, that's it. Li Yundong looked at her strangely, and Chao Yi and the others next to him also agreed. That's right. Li Yundong thought for a moment. Ziyuan was also a woman, and all the members of the Fox Zen School were women. They could avoid suspicion if they stayed together. Li Yundong nodded in agreement, but he quietly glanced at Ziyuan. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded secretly. In the evening, after everyone had fallen asleep, Li Yundong went out of his room with his Yin spirit. As soon as he came out of his room, He saw that Ziyuan was already waiting for him on the balcony of his house, floating like a fairy. This time, Li Yundong's Yin spirit was still in the appearance of a young man. He smiled at Ziyuan and said, "How long have you been waiting?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "Not long. I just got my yang spirit out of my body." She looked at Li Yundong up and down and sighed slightly. "The last time your Yin spirit went out of your body, you already looked like a young man. Now you still look like a young man. Your cultivation hasn't improved at all." Li Yundong also sighed and said, "Yes, I only needed to take care of the little girl in the past." 2 mouths were naturally easy to deal with. Now there are more than a dozen mouths waiting to be fed. The burden on my shoulders is not light. I have to find a way to make money so that I can have the mood to cultivate. Seeing his worried face, Ziyuan comforted him in turn. "You don't have to worry. There will be a way when the car comes to the mountain, and the boat will go straight when it comes to the bridgehead. It will get better." Li Yundong was also a naturally optimistic person. He chuckled and said, "I was just sighing casually. Let's go, let's go." Ziyuan nodded, and the two of them quickly turned into a beam of blue light and left. When the two of them flew to the top of the mountain where they had buried the 2 big golden snakes, Li Yundong landed and saw that the flat ground had been dug up and the 2 big golden snakes inside had disappeared. "Watch net. 7th K. O.M." Li Yundong said with a sullen face. "Sure enough, it's gone." Ziyuan frowned and said, "Actually, I haven't figured it out." "Why did you suddenly want to see if the golden snake is still there?" Li Yunong said with a cold face. "I've always felt that someone was secretly spying on our Fox Sen school. Especially after Zhang Sun Hong died, I found a figure peeping at the heavenly Jindan technique in the secret room. I was more and more sure of this feeling." Ziyuan suddenly said, "I understand, so you came here to see if these 2 big golden snakes are still there. If they are, it means that all of this may be a coincidence. If they're not, it means that someone has been spying on you from the beginning." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, that's true. It's very likely that this person has been following us and watching where we buried the golden snakes. Then, after we left, he came back to take out the bodies of the 2 golden snakes." Ziyuan asked, "Could it be Zheng Yuan who did it?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "It's also possible that Zheng Yuan came back, but it's unlikely. This mountain is so big. How did he know where we buried the golden snakes? The person who has been following us all the time must have a higher cultivation than us if he can't be found. With such a person staring at me from behind, I feel like I can't eat or sleep in peace." Ziyuan comforted him. "Don't worry too much. Maybe a villager happened to see them and dug them up." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You know that's impossible. This kind of mountain is so sparsely populated that no one comes here on weekdays. The top of the mountain is even more rugged. Only cultivators like us who can fly can come up. How can ordinary people come up? Moreover, we buried them so deep that if someone hadn't seen us buried here with their own eyes, they wouldn't have noticed anything unusual." Ziyuan sighed and said, "Then who could it be? It's really an eventful time." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "In my opinion, this person has either used the scales or fangs of the golden snakes to make powerful magical weapons, or Naiden and flesh to improve his skills. When the time comes, we will see which powerful magical weapons in the cultivation world are related to these, and we will probably be able to guess who dug these 2 golden snakes away. As long as we find this person, we will be able to find the mysterious person who is watching the Fox Sen school." Ziyuan nodded and said, "There's another possibility. Let's go to the internet." Li Yundong asked, "What is it?" Ziyuan said, "They may be using the Naiden of these 2 golden snakes to refine the Jindan. As I said before, the Naiden of the golden snakes is a necessary medicinal material for refining the Diyuan Jindan. Without this medicinal material, it's impossible to refine the Diyuan Jindan." Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, "So whoever refines the 3 great elixirs of life may be the mysterious person?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "It's very likely." Moreover, This big golden snake said that the Medicine King tripod was about to appear. Now that these two golden snakes have been stolen, I always feel that a great storm is brewing in the cultivation world. This matter is very likely to involve your Fox Sen school and our Lingong sect. Li Yundong's face darkened, and he nodded. After a while, he let out a long sigh and said, "Yes, I also have the same feeling. It seems that someone is plotting against the Fox Sen school." Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "It's okay. There will always be a day when the truth will come to light. If someone really wants to plot against the Fox Sen school, you can deal with all kinds of changes with inaction and wait for the other party to show up." Li Yundong said, "You're right. We should solve the financial problem first, and then find a way to strengthen the strength of the Fox Sen school. As long as we are strong, the other party can't do anything to us." Ziyuan praised, "That's right." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then let's go back." The two of them didn't stay for long and flew all the way back. It only took them 2 or 3 hours to go back and forth. At this time, Su Chan was secretly observing Zhou Qin in her room to see if she had fallen asleep. After watching for a long time, she heard Zhou Qin's soft breathing. Only then did she confirm that Zhou Qin had fallen asleep. She quietly got up, opened the door, and was ready to sneak into Li Yundong's room. But when she arrived at the living room, she saw that Ziyuan was meditating in the dining room. The young disciples of the Fox Sen school were lying on the carpet in the living room. Su Chan was about to carefully pass by them, but suddenly, these girls opened their eyes in unison and stared at Su Chan. Su Chan was sweating in her heart. She felt as if she had been caught red-handed, and cold sweat broke out on her back. The little girl smiled dryly, raised her head, and said, "Ah, the moon is so beautiful today. I'm going out to bask in the moonlight." "Well, bask in the moonlight." The little foxes gave a meaningful "oh" in unison, and then said in unison, "Then we also want to bask in the moonlight." Su Chan's heart was filled with hatred. These stinky girls, how dare they fight with me? They were actually waiting for me here. She put her hands on her hips, lowered her voice, and glared at them. "Little girl, I'm going to find my master. If you have any objections, stand up." The little foxes gave another "oh" in unison, then giggled and closed their eyes. Seeing that they had stopped making noise, Su Chan quickly slipped away. She also knew where Wan Hongling's room was, so she slipped to the balcony of their house, pushed the door open, and slipped in quietly. The little girl was proficient in the art of invisibility and hiding. In addition, Wan Hongling was meditating, so no one noticed her sneaking in. When she found Li Yundong's room, Li Yundong's Yin spirit had just returned. The little girl saw a flash of blue light, and a young man threw himself on Li Yundong's body. Li Yundong slowly woke up. The little girl held her breath and watched attentively. After Li Yundong woke up from his meditation, his eyebrows were furrowed, and his face was full of worry. After a while, he sighed, turned over, and fell onto the bed, ready to sleep. The little girl walked over quietly and was about to climb into bed. Unexpectedly, as soon as her body touched the bed, Li Yundong suddenly turned over and shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" Su Chan appeared, shushed him, and said with a smile, "It's me, Master. Don't you know me?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "It's you? Why are you here?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong eagerly and said, "Sister Zhou Qin, you stole my quilt when I was sleeping. I can't stand the cold, so I came to you for warmth." As she said this, she thought to herself, "Sister Zhou Qin, I'm sorry. I let you be a bad person this time. Next time, I will definitely repay you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You want to be warm? But I'm also very cold. What should I do?" Su Chan refused to believe him. She giggled and said, "No, my master is the warmest. Forget it, I want to crawl under the quilt." As she said this, she lifted the quilt and crawled in. But as soon as she got in, she found that Li Yundong's quilt was really cold. Li Yundong's body was even colder. She screamed because of the cold and tried to crawl out with her hands and feet. As she crawled, she shouted, "Why is your body so cold? I'm freezing to death. Li Yundong laughed. How could he let the little girl crawl away? He grabbed her back and said, Where are you going? We'll share blessings and misfortunes together. The little girl struggled and said angrily, I'm freezing to death. I'm freezing to death. You're going to freeze your little girl to death. Li Yundong's yin spirit came out of his body. Most of the yang qi in his body shrank in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen, and the rest turned into yin spirit and ran out. There was only yin qi left in his body, so naturally his whole body was cold. He laughed and said, Little girl, your master is also very cold. Please warm me. When Su Chan heard this, she stopped struggling. She turned her head and looked at Li Yundong pitifully. Well, I'll warm you up, but you can't deliberately freeze me. After that, the little girl snuggled into Li Yundong's arms and breathed on his chest. She rubbed her hands together for a while, then rubbed them back and forth on Li Yundong's arms. As she rubbed them, she blinked at Li Yundong. Uncle, are you warm? She asked. Li Yundong's body was not warm, but his heart was warm. He looked at the little girl lovingly, and the look in his eyes became gentler and gentler. He suddenly held the little girl tightly in his arms and said lovingly, Silly girl. After that, the majestic and vigorous yang qi hidden in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen surged out, and his body suddenly became warm. The little girl was in Li Yundong's arms. Originally, she was afraid that she would be frozen into a popsicle, but as soon as her body touched Li Yundong's, she found that his body was warm. She immediately smiled and said, Master, your body is warm. Did I warm you? Li Yundong looked at the little girl in his arms with a smile and said meaningfully, Yes, you warm me. With you here, I can warm up no matter how cold my body is. The two of them looked at each other in the dark room. Under the moonlight, they could see each other's bright eyes. The two of them smiled at the same time, and their smiles were full of sweetness and happiness. Chapter 331. Go to WatchNet. The two of them snuggled up to each other, listening to each other's heartbeats and breathing each other's breaths. After a long time, Li Yundong suddenly smiled and said in a low voice, Girl, we haven't been so intimate for a long time, have we? Su Chan smiled sweetly and said softly, Yes, we haven't kissed for a long time. Li Yundong smiled and said, Then let's have a kiss. Without thinking, Su Chan immediately leaned over and gave Li Yundong a hard kiss on the cheek. Then, she shrank back and giggled. Go to WatchNet. Li Yundong deliberately pretended to be dissatisfied and said, You can't just kiss on the cheek. How old are you? You can't kiss on the cheek. Su Chan's cheeks were very red, but she was not afraid of being seen by Li Yundong at night. She giggled and said, Then where should I kiss? Li Yundong smiled and said, Of course it's to kiss. Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, Then close your eyes. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, Fool, you can't see your own fingers in front of you. Why should I close my eyes? If you don't kiss me, I'll kiss you. It's a big crime to make me kiss you on my own initiative. Su Chan let out a cry and asked timidly, What kind of big crime? Li Yundong chuckled and said, Pull up your pants and spank your butts. Su Chan twisted her body and said coquettishly, No. My butt will be broken. Li Yundong touched it with a smirk and said, Let me touch it. How can it be broken? Su Chan giggled and grabbed his hand. She smiled and said, Okay, I'll kiss you. After that, she pouted and moved closer to Li Yundong, kissing him on the mouth like a chick pecking rice. How could Li Yundong allow her to run away? He grabbed her and kissed her heavily. At first, Su Chan was still giggling, but as Li Yundong's tongue pried open her teeth, Su Chan's soft body seemed to turn into a pool of spring water, softly melting into Li Yundong's arms. The little girl was kissed by Li Yundong until she kept moaning. When their lips parted, the little lass wiped her wet lips and giggled, My mouth is numb. You are so annoying. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Little girl, when I asked you to give it to me, You said that I hadn't reached the Zhuji phase yet. Hehe, now that your master has reached the Zhuji phase and is your leader, you have to give it to me, right? As he spoke, his hand moved towards the little lass's soft chest. Watch net. The little girl was startled and laughed. She quickly covered her chest with her hands and shook her head like a rattledrum. She said in a panic, Here? No, no. How could Li Yundong agree? He grabbed a jade rabbit on the little girl's chest and said with a smile, What don't you want? Could it be that you don't want to stop? Su Chan struggled and said with a smile, You're so annoying. Li Yundong hugged the little girl, bit her ear, and said with a smile, Don't you know this joke? Well, I'll tell you. It was said that there was a beautiful girl who was often molested on the bus. Later, she told her mother about it, and her mother taught her, Next time someone touches your upper body, you should shout no, and if someone touches your lower body, you should shout stop. When the girl heard this, she secretly kept it in mind. As a result, she was molested on the bus again, and this person touched her upper and lower body at the same time, so the girl shouted, Don't stop. Li Yundong chuckled and touched the girl's most secret and precious place with his other hand. He said with a smile, Are you going to shout no, too? Hearing this, Su Chan pressed her chin tightly against her chest, lowered her head, and giggled. She said with a smile, You don't want to stop. Li Yundong laughed and said, Yes, I won't stop. Only then did Su Chan realize that she had said something wrong. She hit Li Yundong's chest with her fist and scolded him with a smile, You're so bad. You only know how to take advantage of me. No way, not here. Li Yundong begged with a sad face, Girl, your master has been away for a long time. Don't you feel embarrassed to leave him alone like this? Su Chan stuck close to Li Yundong and begged, Sir, I'm all yours, but I really don't want to do it here. This is Zhenren Ziyuan's room. I feel so awkward. Li Yundong's face turned serious, and he pretended to be angry. Then why did you come here to seduce me? Su Chan giggled and said, I just came here to keep warm. Li Yundong said with a straight face, You're here to keep warm, but what if there's no one to put out the fire when I'm on fire? Su Chan was so shy that she covered her face with her hands and giggled. Then what do you want me to do? I just don't want to be here. I beg you, sir, I'll give you whatever you want. Li Yundong said with a gloomy face, You make it sound nice, but you won't give me anything substantial. Go to the internet. 7th K.O.M. Humph. Big hoodwinker. Su Chan buried her head in Li Yundong's arms and said coquettishly, Well, sir, be good. Your cultivation is rising now. Don't break your Yuanyang body. It would be a pity. Li Yundong couldn't help but say in shock, Last time you said that you would wait for me to reach the Zhuji phase, and this time you're talking about it. Can I only see it and not eat it for the rest of my life? Su Chan scratched Li Yundong's cheek with her fingers and said with a smile, Shame on you. You're the leader of a sect, but you're thinking about these things. You're so shameless. Li Yundong said seriously, Nonsense, with a group of vixens like you. How can I be serious? After that, he said with a salivating face, Besides, the sages also said that food and lust are human nature. The matter between a man and a woman is a human relationship. What's there to be ashamed of? Su Chan giggled and said in a sweet voice, Anyway, you're right. If you can't do it, then you can't. This is Ziyuan's room, and Wan Hongling is still next to it. I don't want to be here. Besides, now that you're so powerful, I can't take your yang to make up for my yin. But what if you take my yin away? Wouldn't that make me even weaker? Li Yundong let out a long sigh and said, In the end, it still doesn't work. Oh my God, did you deliberately send such a demon to punish me? Zhou Qin said that I must have been single for 9 lifetimes to cultivate my luck with women in this life. I think I must have been too dissolute in the past, so I sent a little demon like you to torture me in this life. Hearing this, Su Chan giggled and said, Sir, in the way of dual cultivation, it's not that you pick me or I pick you. It's very difficult for 2 people to pick each other and then improve their skills. Unless. Li Yundong hurriedly asked, Unless what? Su-chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, unless our skills are about the same. You take the yin qi in my body for your own use, and I take the yang qi in your body for my own use. This is called dual cultivation. Only the way of balance is the king. Otherwise, if one side is weak, it will be easy to die. You should know that when the human essence gate is opened, it is also the time when a person's defense is the weakest. If they are not careful, they will be possessed by the devil and be doomed eternally. Li Yundong said with a sad face, "Oh my God, is dual cultivation still so dangerous? How long will it take for you to catch up with me?" Su-chan giggled and said, "That depends on how well you teach me." Li Yundong said with a bitter face, "This is something that distant water can't put out a nearby fire." As he spoke, he suddenly had an idea. He thought for a moment and said seriously, "Well, I'll teach you a peerless divine kung fu that has been unparalleled in the past 5,000 years. Su-chan vaguely felt that Li Yundong's words were not good, but she still pursed her lips and asked with a smile, "What kind of divine skill?" Li Yundong grabbed the little girl's hand and put it down, then said with a righteous expression, "5 dragons embracing the pillar magic skill." Su-chan retracted her hand with a cry and blushed. She laughed so hard that she fell into Li Yundong's arms. She giggled and said, "You're so bad. What kind of divine skill is this?" Li Yundong said with a serious face, "Don't underestimate this kind of divine skill. This is a peerless divine skill that can be used to put out fires and eliminate disasters. If it weren't for this set of divine skills, I'm afraid it would be difficult for you to keep your virginity today." Seeing that Li Yundong was scaring her with a straight face, Su-chan also pretended to be timid. She carefully reached out her hand and said tentatively, Then I'll try." Seeing that he had spent a long time talking, Li Yundong finally got something. He immediately laughed, and his face was like a flower. Well, young people should be brave to try. As the saying goes, true knowledge comes from practice. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. "Hey, do you think you're pulling a radish?" Su-chan replied weakly, "Oh, then what should I do? I don't know how to do it."
You teach me."
Li Yundong sighed, raised his right hand, and said to Su-chan, "Look, this is your senior. The 5 dragons embracing the pillar magic skill has been cultivated to the 9th level, the 9th level. Come over and say hello to your senior." Su-chan giggled and touched Li Yundong's right palm. She deliberately said, Greetings, senior. There are so many calluses on your face." Li Yundong was furious. The asterisk starred, "There are no calluses. No one has calluses on their face." Su-chan laughed so hard that she almost choked. She said with a smile, "Well, there are no calluses, no calluses." Li Yundong snorted and raised his right hand high, looking like a fraud. "That's more like it. How dare you not respect the old? Hurry up and kowtow to the ancestor 3 times." Su-chan was born to laugh, but she had also met Li Yundong, who loved to joke around. She laughed so hard that her eyes curved into crescent moons. She sat up solemnly and kowtowed 3 times to Li Yundong's right hand on the bed. After Su-chan finished kowtowing, she blinked at Li Yundong and said, "Done." Li Yundong pretended to be displeased. "There's no sound at all. You're not sincere." Su-chan said with a wronged expression, "We're on the bed. How can we make a sound?" Li Yundong snorted and turned his head away. "That's none of my business." Su-chan rolled her eyes, giggled, and kowtowed again. This time, every time she kowtowed, she would make her own dong-dong sound. Li Yundong almost laughed when he heard this. He glared at her and said, "Do you think you're doing a film and TV show? You're actually doing your own dubbing." Su-chan threw herself into Li Yundong's arms with a smile and said coquettishly, "Well, master, I've already acknowledged you as my master. Don't make things difficult for me." After that, her eyes suddenly fell on Li Yundong's left hand. She couldn't help but ask, "By the way, your right hand has cultivated the 5 dragons embracing pillar to the 9th level. What about your left hand?" Li Yundong was stunned, but he quickly said, "Your left hand belongs to your Shenyang. She cultivates another set of magic skills." Su Chan asked with a smile, "What kind of magic skills?" Li Yundong snorted and said, "Your Shenyang cultivates the yin-yang palm. If you don't believe me, why don't you let her experiment on you?" After that, he moved the 5 fingers of his left hand maliciously, looking Su Chan up and down and smirking. Su Chan quickly hugged Li Yundong's right hand and said, "I'll cultivate the 5 dragons embracing pillar." Li Yundong had a cunning smile on his face. He said with a smile, "Then hurry up and cultivate." "Oh," Su Chan said weakly. "Then don't blame me if I don't cultivate well." Then she stretched out her hand towards him. Li Yundong closed his eyes with an intoxicated expression. After a while, he opened his eyes again and looked at Su Chan helplessly. "Are you playing the guqin? Can you use a little more strength?"
Oh.
"Hey, be gentle. Are you kneading dough?"
Oh.
"Hey, do you think you're drilling wood to make a fire?"
Oh.
The two of them struggled for a long time, and Su Chan finally found some tricks. Li Yundong was also gradually getting into a good mood. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Chaner, don't stop." Su Chan raised her head and blinked at Li Yundong. The little girl's face was particularly delicate and charming in the moonlight. Her charming eyes were like silk, and the corners of her eyes were curved when she smiled, which was indescribably attractive. Li Yundong couldn't help but hold the little girl in his arms and kiss her. Their tongues were entangled together. Just as Li Yundong was about to lose control, they suddenly heard a sneer in their ears. Humph! This sound was like thunder piercing through their ears, and Li Yundong and Su Chan were so shocked that they jumped up, and the desire in their bodies faded away. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.